member George Fisher.
Here.
Budget committee member Laura Fisher.
Here.
Budget committee member Lance Masters. Budget committee member Tiffany Pruitt.
Here.
I'd like to ask, did Lance call in? To anybody?
Spoke from yesterday, he may be late, that's all I know, I didn't hear from him today.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, Cheryl.
Budget committee member Tom Cramblett.
Here.
Budget committee member Sandra Kelly.
Here.
Budget committee member Kevin Benson.
Here.
Budget committee member Eva Zerpe. Budget committee member
Sorry,
Darlene.
she's running late.
And she did say that she didn't know whether she could make it or not.
Budget committee member Darlene Sillinger.
She will be here as soon as she can. She hasn't, another obligation.
Budget committee member Shauna Hazel. Budget committee member Karen Syed.
Here.
Budget committee member Guy Hay.
Here.
Budget committee member Bobby Walker.
Here.
Budget committee member Don Hay.
Here.
Thank you.
We'll do the approval of the minutes now. I received a letter from Jane Solinger that she asked me to read into the record, and I believe everybody has a copy of that, including Cheryl. And it says Budget Committee Members, Budget Officer Richard Carson. After receiving Mr. Carson's letter dated May 20th, 2011, and I believe there's a copy of that, part of that, included with this. I reviewed the recording from the May 18th budget meeting. Mr. Carson makes a statement in this letter that I apparently did not read the entire sentence in the budget message concerning the city's health insurance plan, and I stated there was an inconsistency in his budget message. I want to assure you that I have read the entire budget message several times. I've attached an email that I sent Mr. Carson dated May 5th, in which I also forwarded to city council members for which I had an email address for. As you can see by my email, I'm asking a pretty straightforward question. Regardless of the date of negotiations, my question was, can you find out if we are paying the most expensive plan that CIS offers, as Pamela Bowles said, or did the city negotiate to another plan as stated in the budget message? Mr. Carson emailed me back but stated that he would check it out. After reviewing the recorded budget meeting, I can assure you that I did not say that the budget message was inconsistent. This is another subject. I merely wanted to know if what was stated in the budget message about health insurance was a true statement. After waiting 13 days for my answer, I merely repeated my question to Mr. Carson during the May 18th budget meeting, as health insurance discussion had been on our agenda for the past several meetings. I felt it was important for me to know what plan the city employees are on. Mr. Carson replied, I don't have an answer for that question. My frustration comes from the fact that Mr. Carson is the budget officer and signed his name to the budget message as its author and therefore should have full knowledge of its contents. Every budget member has the right to question any document produced for staff consideration in the budget process and should not feel chastised for asking. Now that Mr. Carson has found the answer to my question and the city's non-union employees negotiated to a preferred provider option, this brings to mind another question. When in the last 10 years did the city negotiate up to the most expensive plan? I believe that would be relevant information under the historical context part of the budget message as suggested by Mr. Carson. I also have a correction in the minutes on page 2, line 6, after UW Price explained that money is for rent of the building and goes to the general fund. After reviewing the recorded message, FM Bump stated that that is city policy. I am not sure as to which city policy she was referring to. In the budget policies for FY 11-12, number 7, it reads, each of the utility funds, water, sewer, CAD TV, and light shall pay a use of property fee to the general fund. Use of property fees represent the rent, lease, or mortgage payments, property maintenance, costs, etc., that a utility not owned by the city would probably pay for the buildings that house their offices and storage areas. If the city did not own the utilities, similar payments would be the cost of doing business for that utility. My question is, why is this fee being assessed to the street department, which is not a utility, and for how long has this been going on? Maybe there's another policy somewhere that city council came up with to charge these fees, or perhaps has this been done this way repeatedly because city policy, and it becomes city policy. If not, should the street department be reimbursed? Also, on page 9, most of the conversation between Mr. Carson and BCM Benson is not reflected. Page 10, line 11, did not say when there's a mistake, it's carried over. It stated if there's a mistake, it's carried over. I believe this makes a difference as to the point I was trying to make. I will not be attending the budget committee meeting tonight as I have a prior commitment. Thank you for taking the time to read this for the record. Budget committee member Darlene Solinger. So Darlene has mentioned a couple of corrections there. One of them would be page 2, line 6. UV Price explained that money is for rent for the building and goes to the general fund as reviewing recorded message. FO Bump stated that this is city policy. I'm not sure what she says.
That's just a question.
Okay, okay, that's a question, and so, you see the correction?
We got it on page 9, that's right there at the bottom of the roll.
Okay.
And page 2.
She's saying that a conversation that occurred between Mr. Carson and Mr. Benson is not reflected. Kevin, did you notice anything like that?
Let's see, I think it's-
And page 10 and 11 did not say when there's a mistake that's carried over, but if. The committee likes to make that word change, and I'm not sure, do you know what conversation she's talking about? So what's the will of the committee? Anybody else have any corrections they'd like to submit?
I have some typo errors. On page 1, halfway through the big paragraph there, it says he said the worst, and I think that's supposed to be worst. It's like halfway down through that paragraph. And then there is, on page 4, under the water fund 21, 4th sentence up, and I think that should be that, and that's how they came up with that. And then on the very last page, page 10, fifth sentence up, right in the middle, it says, she said that they've been told this is the earliest we've ever started. One of those words doesn't belong there.
Are there any other corrections? Would somebody make a motion, please? To accept the minutes with the corrections Tiffany has made. Yes, Ralph.
Can I just just ask, since there's some question on what some of the other corrections might be, could we maybe, I can go back and listen to the tape, then correct the minutes, then maybe approve them at the next meeting?
That would be
Is
good.
that okay?
Okay. Is there a consensus, everybody in favor of tabling the minutes until the next meeting?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, we'll do that. Okay, next on the agenda is the discussion of loans, but, first of all, Kevin, brought up an issue that, I think would be a good idea to discuss before we discuss that, and it was that of declining balances. And were those charts in this audit report that was distributed to everybody? Kevin, could you,
It was just something I just noticed on the, as I was preparing for the meeting.
well, maybe Mary Ann would have some.
Yeah, it's about the audit report, and, for example, if you go to the general fund,
Next to the last page.
next to the last page, and there's, at the top, there's, a chart of the years and revenues, expenditures, net revenues, less expenditures, and then the fund balance at the bottom. But somehow these numbers don't correspond to the fund balance doesn't equal the net revenue less expenses for the following year. Example, 2007 had a fund balance of $197,000. The following year, we had a positive net less expenses of $105,000. But the balance only went up by $24,000. But there was a $105,000 positive balance for that year. And then the following year, it actually has a positive balance of $77,000, but the balance declines by 70-some thousand. I was just wondering, it doesn't quite make sense to me. I see that the balances are going down, but every year the net revenue less expenses is a positive number.
It's like that throughout the funds.
I've looked at a couple other ones, and it seems to be that that's the case, but I
I don't know how to explain it. Do the transfers.
You need bank account statements,
have no idea. I was just curious.
bank account statements
Yeah,
maybe.
it doesn't make
I don't know.
any sense.
I have had, a number of requests from citizens and from, some budget committee members to, obtain some kind of a bank statement, at least on the interest-bearing accounts. So we can see what the correlation is between the actuality and the numbers.
Actually, from the blog, they talk about that ordinance 123, and the citizens seem to think that the council is supposed to be privy to that information, the council is supposed to be privy to that information monthly.
And I believe that we did distribute ordinance 123. And so that information should be readily available according to 123. And the budget committee does have the authority to ask for documents, etc. And I would like to get a consensus that we ask for as close to as you can get to a bank statement for our regular accounts and actual bank statements on the interest-bearing accounts, like the reserve accounts. Anybody in favor of doing this, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed?
Aye.
I,
Is that two, Shauna and Karen?
Yes.
What's the reason?
Shauna?
They don't have to.
They don't, I think,
I thought
You
this
don't
is
have to,
budget
you have the
committee, and that's
option.
kind of not, I feel my role.
Precisely, this is budget committee.
Yes, it is, and that's why
And
we're
I
given
don't
the
feel
power.
that- And I don't feel bank statements is part of what I do as a budget committee member.
Okay, fine. Noted for the record. And now I lost my agenda. Okay, we're discussing, loans. Were there any other subjects that budget committee members wanted to bring up before we got into the discussion about loans?
I'm curious about this, statement that, Ms. Solinger makes about the street fund being charged for, the use of city property fee.
We did take that out this year,
Did we?
didn't we? I
Yes, you
believe we
did.
removed that this
You
year.
removed it from the street fund, yes, you did.
Right.
Which will remove it from the general fund also, as a revenue source.
For how many years did we take that out of the street fund?
That's been that way since I've been here and prior to that,
Really?
yes. I believe it's been a long time.
So how far do we have to go back to make it correct?
George, I couldn't answer that question without going back.
I don't think you go back, you go forward.
Okay.
That's absolutely true. There's not much we can do to try to make up for what's been done in the past, but we can set it on a path that's more correct now.
Okay.
And now I'd like to open the discussion on the loans. Now, the city council did some work at their last council meeting and decided to appropriately budget for the loans that we owe. There was some confusion on the resolution, but I'm sure that that can be corrected. And included in your packet was an amortization schedule, but that amortization schedule included interest. And if I'm not mistaken, the council decided to fund that loan without interest,
That's correct.
which brought me to a question to Mary Ann. Does the capital reserve receive interest?
Has it or does it?
Does it?
The funds that are in our investment pool does receive interest, which then is turned into the capital reserve fund, yes.
And is that where this $450,000 was taken from?
Yes, it is. From capital reserve fund 56.
Okay, now my next question would be, does that forgive the interest that has, because the resolution, the original resolution included interest, would interest be charged for the first 3 years? Does this council, can they forgive the interest that it's all, okay. So, but that does make this amortization schedule a bit off, because this includes 0.5% interest over a period of 10 years. So the loan amount, I assume, would.
Basically, you take off the interest
Take
payment.
off the interest payment.
That's over here on the right. You just take
Right.
that off and reduce that amount
Yes.
and add.
And are we up on the interest paid for the first 3 years? Has that all been paid?
No, that's including in your loan amount of $464,000.
Oh, okay.
That
the
is
interest
included
for the
in
first
there,
3 years
yes.
is included in that
Yes,
amount.
yes,
That's $14,789.
yes. Also, when you got the loan schedule, you also got the schedule that shows the balance, estimated balance
Right.
at the end of June, based on the interest rate that is currently.
Right,
So that is what I took to put up at the top of the loan,
okay,
which includes the interest for the 3 years.
okay. And both loans are scheduled out, and the payments are approximately,
The total, if I may, Madam Chair,
please do.
the total per month would be $4,078.16.
And that's an
which would be an annual, amount of $48,937.92.
And that's the two loans.
That's the two loans put together. I mean, I added the two payments together,
Okay. And was it,
if my calculations.
was it the opinion of council that the Mimi Morissette loan would just be paid back as it's being paid back now? That we weren't going to pay that off? Because we had discussed at one point paying that, and then at another point, it didn't seem to be a priority. What was the decision
I
with
don't
that?
know if we've ever gotten to it. I think Rich was researching it because the resolution states that it was to be paid.
Right,
Like during that,
after 7 years.
no, during that budget cycle.
After that. And there's a balance of 13,000 there?
Yes, ma'am, there is.
Okay, and any other outstanding debts that need to be serviced that are new to us at this time?
Oh, excuse me, what was Mimi's, did you say again, or all?
13,000
Wasn't that the one that was supposed to be paid off
That's
with
the loan from the
SDCs?
SDC fund, yes, that needs to be paid back by SDC
I
fund.
just thought you had a.
Okay, and also, where did you include the money to be budgeted for the repayment? Okay, sure.
Oh, I just wanted to bring attention, of course, I guess we can deal with it later again, but the money, there's also another loan that we're gonna have to address, and that's the loan to the Cascade Housing Project.
That was my
to Ru-
question. You
to
read my
Rudy
mind.
Mason. And that's gonna be in approximately an amount of $29,000 that's gonna have to be repaid back to City Light,
Okay,
okay?
now.
So that's something that we haven't addressed yet because the council hasn't voted on it.
Mm-hmm,
But if you look at it in comparison's sake, it's gonna be close to what the one loan is for $25,000.
Right.
It'll be a little more than that, so
Just
it'll
a
be
little
a
bit
little over a couple $100 a month. So just something I wanted to just mention.
okay, well, I think we should, definitely keep track of all of what there is to do at the same time. And was there any other, I had questioned personally about this resolution number 1154, because I'm still seeking an explanation on why our funds have been declining when we're in a positive cash flow situation inside those funds. And here there was, $50,000 taken out of both streets and water. No.
That was, George, that was the one you guys voted on in error.
Oh, yeah. That was the one that, actually, that one's already been done,
Mhm.
so it's passed, and we had the wrong, it should have been 1175.
No, I understood that part, but in looking for an explanation about the declining funds, the funds declined dramatically during the same period when this $50,000 was taken out. And I don't see that much reflected in the street fund, the portion of the capital reserve fund. Mary Ann?
Madam Chair, that loan was done from Fund 56, not from the operating funds. It was done from the reserve funds. So your beginning balance in the funds would not reflect that, and it was paid back in June 11th. And I did not have time to get you those copies as you had asked. I will do that, but I ran out of time tonight.
How does the capital reserve streets then only have $10,000 in it?
I need to find my sheet
Or am I confusing that?
of capital reserves. I never can find it. I know. I know it's in here.
I think I'm wrong on that number, but it has less than that.
No. I thought I put that in here.
It's not in.
George, you don't have your capital reserve, do you?
Oh, which
Do you
one?
have your capital reserve balance sheet?
Section 5, I think it's
Section
Cascade.
five? No, I'm looking for the capital reserve.
Section 5 on the last page.
I'm sorry.
Here, this one,
I'm sorry, I can't seem to find mine. Yeah, it lists all the
Street,
funds.
so it says it has $118,000 in that, is that true?
Yes, the street funds has $118,000 reserve,
Okay,
not 10.
okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
Would there be any other discussion on the loans, other than, I think there's been a lot of comments from citizens and from interested parties that they feel that the debt of the one loan is a city debt and not a EMS or a fire department debt. And I never thought personally that we were going to fund that out of EMS or the fire department. It's the general fund. The unfortunate twist to that is the general fund also services the EMS and the fire department. So you can only spend your money so many different ways. So although we're not attributing all of this debt to the fire department, there's only so much money in the general fund, and that's where we're at, George.
While you're on the subject of loans, this letter that's here about the fire station loan balance in Fund 56, has everybody had a minute to look at that?
But this is, where?
It was,
It's the sheet I
Oh,
put on your
okay.
desk.
yeah. Anyway, you can read through it, and I'll go ahead and just tell you what my thoughts is about this. This was about why there was a difference in the fire fund of $44,670.70. And I think, was it you, Tiffany, or was it Darlene? Tiffany brought it up a while back. And now it looks like we're asking the departments to come back and pay for these. And I guess, from what I was just told a little bit ago, is that we had to look forward, not backwards, and that we couldn't go backwards and find out how much money had been taken out of the street funds for the street paying for something. I don't understand why we can go back and ask these departments to pay for something that was done in 2008, 2009. To me, it's all past. It's all past history.
I have a comment to make there too. It also says it was done on a verbal transaction by our ex-city administrator, and quite frankly, that means nothing to me
And I have
personally. But Laura?
a question regarding when it was done. Was it done in 2010 or,
2008,
2008,
2009.
2009.
so it wouldn't account for why 2010 the fund ran out of money?
No, it would not.
Okay.
And
So-
that's in capital reserve, Laura, not the operating budget that this is reflected in.
different.
This is capital reserve that this is reflected in, not the operating fund.
Kind of already expressed this to Mary Ann, that I find it upsetting that this can be the situation for 3 years. This has been a long time ago. And that nobody caught it up until now, up until, it was discovered that the fire department has spent $44,000 more than they had. And I guess they were spending this money that they hadn't actually received yet, per verbal agreement. So, George?
So anyway, I guess you can read it, but from what I just understand, we can't go backwards. So I don't see how we can go back and ask these departments to pay this.
Is it that we can't go backwards or that we pick and choose? I don't think.
Well,
that's
I
the
was
first
just
one.
told we're going forward. We're
I
not
mean,
going backwards.
I agree completely with what you're saying.
Pardon me?
But we need to ask the budget officer who does this, I mean.
Mary Ann's here, we could ask Mary Ann.
Shauna, is anybody raising their hand anymore? I believe somebody was talking. If you have something to say, I'd appreciate it if you'd raise your hand, and same with Laura, everybody else. Okay, please continue, George.
Anyway, that's all I'm asking. I mean, that's what I've heard, and to me, it makes sense. Those budgets are long past. Those mistake is long past. It's not like it was a loan that wasn't paid, or something that was, there's a lot of innuendos, and this is all past history, it was never caught. To me, the budget is what it is, and we have to deal with what we're dealing with today forward. And I guess if that's not the case, then
I agree with that. I also agree that there's a lot of questions, but the point I think that Tiffany was making to begin with, we haven't solved that problem, and there's been $44,000 more expenditures. What are we gonna do in that case? Than there was revenues to reflect it. Which is why I say there's a concern when revenues are being spent before they're gotten, and then they're not being followed up to make sure they're gotten. There's a definite problem, and it resulted in the fire department spending $44,000 over the revenues it had received to do that job. And I don't know how they would have kept track, but I assume that ordinance 123 kind of sees to that, about the information that's supposed to be available and the timeline to make that information available. But I agree with George that there's nothing we can do about that, but I assume that that would go to figure that there's really nothing we can do about that $44,000 as well. Is that your assumption also, George?
basically, I mean, it's 3 budgets ago.
Right, and
You
they
know?
kind of wipe each other out. I mean, we have an indiscretion on one hand, an overspending from revenues not received, and the thing that concerns me here is it's all done according to oral agreement and basically not the way things are, this is not the way business is normally conducted or should be conducted. So, Shauna?
Mary Ann had a comment, I was kind of curious.
No, I was
Oh,
just
I'm sorry.
asking that people talk one at a time, that was my only, because Joe couldn't get the minutes.
So any other budget committee member comments on this? Laura?
Okay, so on the minutes, last week when we were talking with Sheldon, so, cause kinda like he was the interim department head.
Mm-hmm.
And so, same kind of situation here, he made the comment like he has no way to track things.
No, he doesn't know.
And so, in their departments, do they all just give it to Mary Ann and then she's responsible for everything, or do they have to track their own departments? Just a curiosity.
How it works is when they purchase things, we do financials every month. We give them what they spent, how much they have left for the current budget year, and they get that every month. I will admit they haven't got it this month. We're in the middle of a new system and I've just about got it ready to go. But they get that every month so that they can track how much they have spent, how much they have left in their budget, and they should know that.
Yeah, just a continuation. In the minutes here, we discussed how, for instance, it was said that the public superintendent must have budgeted too large of a beginning balance because we didn't need it. And so again, on the tracking, how do, so that we have a better process each budgetary year and more, concise and clear and transparent. Do we have some kind of matrix or something that we follow, a survey, something where we try to improve on our, do we have department heads that help you do this, or are you
The
responsible
department
for
heads,
telling them?
the department heads do their own budget. They do their own forecasting.
That's what I kind of
They
thought.
give it to me, and I put it in the document. Once it's in the document, then the city administrator and the department heads sit down and go over this document to make sure that it is realistic and that we are covering everything that needs to be covered. Then it is processed and given to the budget committee. That is the normal process that has been done since I've started, and
That's what you're
that's
working
what I
on.
was taught, and that's how I do that.
Okay.
I don't go back and say this is too high. That is up to the city administrator and the department heads to iron that out.
So department heads are responsible for
They
their
are
department.
responsible for their department and their
They must have
budget.
a criteria of some
And usually
sort.
they base it on history, or in expenses, we'll take what we spent and multiply it out for the rest of the months, and do it that way. But they are responsible for their budgets, how they spend it, and what they spend.
Okay. I'm just trying to learn, so I appreciate that.
Sure.
Don?
Just a question. The way I've been taught, if I was doing something, I'm sure that there's labor and material and equipment time on all of this work here. I would assume, most of it. For sure, the water extension, they've got backhoes. Don't they have a job order they're charging that to?
No,
There's no job order, no
No,
materials
but not
charged out
purchases.
to nothing.
no.
How do they know where material and
They don't. That's been in the annual audit report for
as long
the
as
last several years, that we need
When
to
I was
have.
on council
a
in
work-
2000,
I don't know how we keep track of stuff.
We don't,
How do we know where it went?
we don't.
there has been a resistance from some department heads, not Mary Ann, to enter, to do the accountability. And the city spent a good deal of money on software 5 or 6 years ago, and it's sitting on the shelf. It was never enacted. So, that's a leadership problem.
There should be a way to go in there to the computer and print this up and find out exactly how much equipment, material, and time went to every one of these charges. And that's what the auditor has said since in the 7 years I've been
Beginning of
back.
time.
I thought it was
7
legally
years
required,
That I know of.
but
I don't know how we keep track. It's unreal.
mind-boggling.
It should be easy.
Well, the budget committee could, I'm sure this council is aware of the problem, but the budget committee could recommend to, make a recommendation to the council that, that accountability for both the tracking labor and materials need to be instilled, and I would think, it's long overdue.
$48,000.
Does everybody, agree with that? Everybody in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed to that recommendation?
I'm abstaining, just because I'm not following the whole conversation.
Okay.
I'm having this, so.
Okay, thank you, Karen. Mary Ann, can you see that gets to, the staff report for the next council meeting to make that recommendation to council?
Mhm.
Thank you. I know that when I was on council years ago with Rob Rostoff, sitting out there in the audience, this was one of our priorities at that time.
I thought it was already.
And it took several years after that to buy the software, and it still hasn't been done, so. And I know there was some problem, I don't even know if the new software goes with if the old
Yes, it
software
does.
goes with the new equipment?
We made sure that it was compatible. In
That's
fact, it's
good.
the same
That's
company.
very good.
So yes, it does.
So we already have it, so this is something we can get started and we'll have it next year.
Well,
This is another one right here.
We'll just move this stuff out of the way.
Glad you could join us, Lance.
All right.
Yeah, the ratification meeting for our teacher contract tonight, so it took me until about 6:30.
Okay, we're in the middle of a discussion about the loans, and it seems to me that I heard some budget committee members, although Eva's not here right now, suggest that we be creative in paying these loans back, or that maybe we don't need to pay them back at this time. And I want to assure everybody, and it's in the record of the budget committee, there's a letter from the Department of Revenue that states the difference between taking money, and that's illegal, and borrowing money is the fact that you pay it back. And when you inflate the value of an offset by double, that is not figuring out how to pay it back. Now, this budget committee and this council has been accused of spending money out of the general fund by servicing this loan. I want to clarify right now, we did not spend the money. The money has been spent. We didn't do it. All we're doing is paying the bills. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever been in the position of paying other people's bills or making up for the mistakes of other people, but that's what we're doing. We are not spending money. We are paying, servicing the loans of the money that has already been spent, as per our legal requirements. Any comments? There's one there. And we'll have to find one more chair somewhere. If Darlene shows up. Eva, I just made reference to one of your comments at the council the other night. And that was that you thought that we could, we're discussing loans right now.
Okay.
You thought we could be creative in the paying back of this loan. Would you please explain what you meant by that?
Well, I just thought
Welcome
that
to the meeting.
we have a lot of heads that we can pull together to try to come up with, ideas. What I had originally thought is, if you could kind of, instead of, we haven't been paying very much on the loan for the fire department. Haven't been paying. So, rather than, if we're going into a time when we think that we're gonna be much more stringent in how we are taking care of our bills, that maybe there can be a transitional period of time that we're working up. I know it sounds like a tell on your face that you think that's a little naive, but I just don't want us to be closed and have in our mind that we can't, because if you say you can't, then you can't. So the thought is that, even if you had an idea of where you could have maybe started, that was just one idea. Maybe started with 1 or 2 years where you didn't quite pay as much, and then work it into your payments. That was just what my thought was there. And then as far as being creative, well, pulling from people that we all know people, and we all, know a little bit about finances. So trying to come up with ideas that can be a little bit creative rather than just in the box. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, well,
Not saying that it's entirely gonna happen, I'm saying that
I understand.
if you believe that you won't, then you won't.
Any other suggestions on how we should handle this debt, other than just pay it? John?
I think we're fortunate if we can pay it back with 0 interest. That's pretty good, I'd say.
Okay.
And the zero interest was nice.
Now,
Pretty
So
good.
Lance?
Didn't the city council vote on that on Monday?
Yeah, we already ruled.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So it's already a
Okay,
pretty good conclusion.
okay. I just
That we're
really did
paying it
not
back.
want misunderstanding in the budget committee or in the public that, in fact, we were budgeting something or we were spending money that wasn't necessary to spend.
The budget committee doesn't spend money. It's the, city council makes those decisions.
I understand that,
Yeah.
Lance. I appreciate if you'd raise your hand from now on, if you want to speak. Anybody else? Okay, so now we'll go on to put off discussion of health insurance. Can anybody open that up?
Make sure you raise your hand.
I really, Darlene Sullinger, this was one of her big issues, and she's not able to be here at the beginning of this meeting. So as much as we've tabled this issue, I would like if we could table it again until she can bring up some of the issues that, yes, George?
My thought is that, actually, I'd like to make a motion that this insurance issue be recommended to go to city council, and council should deal with this in its entirety. That's what I believe should happen.
Okay, there's been a motion. Do I hear a second?
I second that.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Aye. I think that when something hasn't been handled for so long and it gets to the point of a budget crisis, that all avenues need to be looked at. And we're narrowing down the scope. And Mary Ann provided some short-term, they're not solutions, but it's a step in the right direction, which would be a 2.5% increase, which is allowed by the electrical union contract. And I personally think that would be a really good idea. But that could be achieved later on by the council. So I don't object to the way the budget committee voted. My vote is just different. Okay? So that pretty much ends the discussion on health insurance, at least for now. And I would like to make a recommendation to the city council that they take up this discussion as soon as possible. I'd like to have a consensus on that. Does everybody agree with that? Everybody agrees, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Laura?
My question is if, given that Darlene's not here and she's interested in this subject, would she be able to ask questions or give input at the council meeting if you've already met?
Certainly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
Any citizen.
Aye.
Okay, anybody opposed to asking the city council to address this issue? Okay, and then also, could that also be added to the recommendations that's going to be presented to council in their staff report? Appreciate that. Okay, and now we can go into the general fund. And that's on page 1 through 9. And what specifically, I guess,
Page.
they had Department 2, Planning, Property, Department 4, that's page 4 and 5 of Part 2, Government Community Relations, Department 8, page 7, and Police, Department 9, page 9. Does anybody have a preference on how we approach these? Should we just take them one at a time? Okay. Then we'll look at Planning, Department 2, page 4. Unless, we think we should look at the revenues before we look at the expenditures. Anybody have any question about the planning department here? Don?
Are we still keeping this 140 and 150,000 in here, carrying it on and on and on? And why are we?
Which
Why?
$150,000?
Mine are on page,
He's still on page 1,
I'm still on page.
under planning fees.
Okay.
And if we are, why?
Well, they relate directly to
Not raising our hands anymore.
page 4,
Yeah.
the expense, but actually the plan, there's a $5,000 difference in planning.
What?
Okay, we don't have staff here to answer questions, and Kevin apparently has the answer to that.
It's just a carry through in case they do a pass through, in case they do get a project where they have to go and hire a planner. That would be paid for by the person doing the subdivision or whatever. So they have and on page 1, they have a planning, engineering, 150,000, which was what you were referring to, right?
Yes.
And then if you go to page 4, about 5 items from the bottom, it says contract service planning, 155,000.
my question is,
to offset each
why,
other.
why wouldn't they have a supplemental budget to do something that was, maybe Tom has
So,
something.
well, yeah, that's what they do, they have to have it in there, what they tell us to offset. What I don't get on it is there's not a complete offset on it, is, the two of the engineering and the planning comes to, 290, whereas your offset in, on the other side comes to 255. So I'm wondering whether, if we're looking at an offset here, where the other 45,000 is. Are both of those there, Mary Ann, for a potential thing happening, right? And so we've got them set up so that if it doesn't happen, it offsets.
That is partially true. If you'll notice, on the planning fees, you have revenue of 140 and expenditures of 155. That is to cover the cost of planning for city business. Anytime that the planner does for outside the city, for contractors, for subdivisions, for housing, whatever, is paid by that construction company. So the 15,000 is in case we have a planner to do any business of ours. For example, code amendments, anything like that, that the planning commission needs to have done, so that we have a planner represented there. And you'll notice that in the previous years, 08, 09, 9, 10, the city spent roughly 13,000 one year and 12,000 one year. So 15,000 is not out of the ordinary for a planner that is working on stuff the city needs.
So what's the engineer then?
The engineer,
$50,000 difference there.
again, and it's never come that far, $600, $400. It is, again, a placeholder in case we have engineering that needs to be done during the planning stages of some of these developments. In the times I've been with the city, we've never used nearly any of that.
So why would they match each other?
I think that's an
Why would
overhead.
one match the other one?
Because we would have costs if the city needed some engineering studies done or engineering done for the planning department, then those costs would come back to the planning department.
$50,000?
I did say that in the years past, we've not. I was told by Budget Officer Carson to move those funds straight across. If Budget Committee chooses to change that, that's fine. I was told to move what was budgeted last year across in that department, so.
I think we run into a lot of problems thinking we have more revenues than we actually have, and that they should be a more realistic approach to estimating revenues. Don?
I personally would prefer if Mary Ann is stating the rough figures that we're gonna spend for the city. I'd rather see that. And if something happens where we're gonna spend $250,000 that we don't know about, we can have a supplementary budget. Because I think almost if we're gonna spend that much money for engineering, it's gonna affect a lot of other things in our budget. I personally think. I don't understand why it's there, personally. If something that big's gonna happen.
Lance?
Well, I understand that concern, because it does seem inflated. And what I've understood all along is that it's better to budget more, because if you end up in a situation where there's development, or there's a need for these expenditures, and then you have to, and there's a contractor out there that's ready to go, then you have to wait for the supplementary budget process to happen before you can spend that money, because it wasn't already in the budget. So it's just, it's a carry through just in the event that you need it, rather than an accurate representation of what you think you're going to need. Because if you have to stop some sort of planning service because you've run out of money to spend, someone, you know, some contractor somewhere that's ready to build or ready to develop is, you know, is sort of waiting for you to hold the meetings, to pass the budget, to hold the hearings, and to get that supplemental budget in. But like I said, I certainly understand that concern. You know, supplemental budget is one way to do it. Although my first year on council, we passed quite a few supplementary budgets and did create a lot of complexity and misunderstandings. Thank you.
George?
Could I ask Mary Ann a question, and this is on another issue?
Certainly.
On page 1, the transient room tax is only proposed at $80,500.
We upped that, we changed that.
Did we? What did we change that to?
90,000. It's dependent on what you changed in tourism, so whatever you change in term has to go up in general, and Budget Officer Carson said 90,000. That was our 70% of,
Is that an exact figure?
that's what he told. I have not went back and figured out, but I just wrote down what he had
Okay, well, I think
indicated.
Because if you go back and you average these out, yeah, it's pretty close to 90,000.
I mean, I think it's 89 something.
Yep, so
And
so we're actually going to change that to 90 then.
Well, we
Yes.
changed the 30% by $4,000. That made a $4,000 change. So whatever, you know, this is 70%, that's only 30%. But that made a $4,000 difference in the tourism
Okay.
budget.
Thank you.
That's right.
So it should make, I would think more than, well, maybe not,
It's about 90.
about 90,000, okay. So, and I had that same question, so that has been done, a more realistic estimation of the hotel motel room tax, and that both increased tourism revenues and general fund revenues. General fund revenues by
$9,500.
$9,500. That's a very good thing. And I agree about, I think that this should be a pass-through. We did learn, did Tom have a question first?
No.
We learned that an overestimation of revenues, I understand for budgeting things that are total pass-throughs, but this seems to be, you know, considerably not. I'd like to see an offset for the same amount or close to it as a pass-through. I don't think you should have the revenues projected at 150 and the expenditures projected at 100,000. That doesn't make sense to me. That, the only way that could occur is if the city, and that would, I don't know what they mean by the city either, because whatever fund, you know, whatever fund, that would just be the general fund, there would have to be that kind of an engineering expense in 1 year that was unanticipated. And I would think that that big of a project would in fact, you know, justify a supplemental budget. So I would like to see the revenue projection for that lowered or the pass-through higher, raised, one or the other. I think it creates an unrealistic view of how much operating capital we have. Don?
I would prefer to look at the last 4 years and see what it actually we spent and use that figure myself. If we're gonna raise everything on, maybe something's gonna happen, what's the budget for? Let's use as close to what it's been the last 4 or 5 years. Or pick the highest year for the last 5 years.
I just like to state that, and I understand this is all worked out for us, but, I mean, if you look at the planning fees and the engineering fees, okay, and for the most part, we have a reasonably good idea of what's gonna happen here in the next year, okay? The port's building a couple buildings, there's gonna be a health center built. The Cascade project's already, you know, practically underway or close to being underway. I don't know of any other things that are gonna require a whole great deal of planning or budgetary work except for those items in the next year. So I think realistically, we could cut those figures in half and still be well within a margin of being able to complete those tasks, if anything that came up.
Tom?
Yeah, but apparently these things, and I don't know everything about a budget, but apparently these things are just plain old places. It's not really like you're using up cash, or you're having to hang on cash, or you're changing your revenue. Both things are just, it allows you to spend it and it sets you up to take it away, so it becomes a wash, and
So it's just,
so it doesn't affect anything you wanna really do in the budget. If you wanna change things in the budget, you need more money. Neither one of those things are actual cash. There's one coming in, the other one's going out. They're just holding it there
Like you said,
in case you need it.
I think that was
Look at these previous
the
years.
original point is it's not a wash.
Yeah, that's why I don't, that's what I don't get on it. It isn't, I can see the 14, but the 50, that's, are we having to hang on to cash because of the 50 or not?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I mean, I honestly, Madam Chair, I have no problem
Okay.
doing as what,
Well, what?
or going
Don?
down lower, however
Well, to
you
me,
feel.
then why not do it with every item? If it's gonna be, we can guess that we're gonna spend it, or
Well,
if
it
it's
is
a
an
budget,
estimate.
if it's, is it, what I'm saying, I don't believe it's a good estimate. Let's go back and look at 5 years and pick the highest in the last 5 years and use that figure. Isn't that, I bet it'll be closer than this.
Well, I don't have a problem with the principle of a flow-through. I had a problem with the fact that it doesn't flow through.
Well, I have a problem with both.
But Mary Ann said she had no objection. I'd like to get the impression of the rest of the committee members. Kevin, do you have an opinion on this?
I actually agree with Don on take the highest amount in the last 5 years, maybe add 20% to it. And the truth is this fund balance is large enough that 15% of what's the total of the fund is a huge number. We wouldn't need a supplemental budget to add $100,000 to this.
Well, I had a question about where the rest of this flow-through money flow to.
Well, I think that would take care of.
It's actually under, sorry, Chair,
That's okay.
it's actually under refund construction deposits back in 2010-11. I just don't think it was carried over. Page 4. It has 2 asterisks by it, just like the planning engineering estimate, and that would make it 150,000. I just don't think it was carried over, and that would have made it a wash.
I don't see where any is budgeted for that line.
But it
Yeah,
has
but
the
there's nothing
asterisk.
budgeted this year.
Yeah.
It's in the fiscal year.
It just wasn't on the current.
May I comment on the construction deposits, Madam
Yes.
Chair? This year, I was able to go through the last 5, 6 years when all the construction started happening at Shahala, Windsong, and Harmony Heaven, and balance out those construction deposits. Construction deposits are a liability, and they should be on the balance sheet account as a liability, and that we owe the construction contractors as the projects are completed and approved by the city, then that money needs to go back to the contractors. And that is why you do not see it going across here. I have talked with our auditors, and he indicated that that is a liability. It doesn't need to be in the operational side. The money is there. We need to refund it to the construction owners as the projects are finished. It is not $50,000, I believe it is around $17,000 in construction deposits. The deposits have been returned over the previous, prior to me getting here, and we still have some money to get back to them as the projects and the
Is that
subdivisions are
intended to have
approved.
a proposed amount in it this year? Because it doesn't.
No, because it should be on the balance sheet, not as an operational expenditure.
So it has nothing to do with the contract services planning or contract
It,
services?
it did, but it did not get taken out of, Budget Committee member Hazel is correct, that's part of the 50. It did not get taken out of the planning engineering estimates.
But you're still balancing, which means it went somewhere in this budget cycle. Comes out balanced, so that $50,000, if it's not there, not added in,
Pardon me, I do know where it is. Because the 50,000, has been rolled over into beginning balance, that is why our beginning balance is $50,000 instead of $100,000. That money has to come out of the beginning balance. Because it is there, it's actually 17,000, not 50,000, not the 50,000. There are things that I'm finding as I'm going through this, and I'm trying to get them corrected.
No, I'm sure.
And in doing this, I'm talking with the auditors, he's explaining how I need to do it, and that's how I'm trying to do it. Trying to get things back where they're balanced and where I know the money is.
Okay, so if we reduce the revenues, you'll have to balance the expenditures, correct, to offset it? So right now, if
Yes.
we wanted to follow through with Don's suggestion, and it seems that Kevin does, so we'll take a vote on it. By reducing those, do we have to do some research and see what the highest year was on that?
I don't think it has to be all that exact. I mean, $40,000, the highest one I see is 32.
Okay. So planning services, Don?
A question for Mary. The 17,000, does that have anything to do with the contractor's bonds?
No,
that's-
contractor's bond's
It's a
separate.
security.
It's a security
deposit.
deposit so that when contractors,
Right here under
have
contract
art engineering
services,
fees,
right
you know,
in the
con-
field of-
Okay.
and so we have the money to reimburse ourselves when we pay out the engineering.
Yeah, two double asterisks, refund construction deposits. See, there was $50,000 there in 2011, but nothing carried over. That went up into the beginning balance, according to Mary Ann.
Yes, it goes into the
Okay.
beginning balance.
And that is what makes this really not mean that much, because there's a $50,000 has been turned over into the beginning balance that doesn't have the asterisks on it. So it's hard to track that that's not your real beginning balance. Well, anyway, so we'll reduce the revenues.
That's the beginning balance that I believe that we're gonna come forward with once I made that correction in the deposits.
I see.
And that'll be 17,000?
George?
I believe the deposits equal up to about 17,000.
Yeah, you know how Okay, so do I have a motion on reducing the planning fees estimates in revenues on the general fund, the planning fees revenues to $40,000 and the planning engineering estimates to what?
Well, yeah, that's fine.
$40,000 each, would that be satisfactory to you, Don?
If that's more than what we've had over the last 5 years, it would be a little bit more.
Well, actually, it's considerably more than the last 3 years. And if there is a big project, I really think a supplemental budget is a good way to explain that project to the community. Does somebody want to make a motion to this effect?
Go ahead.
I'll make a motion that we reduce the planning fee to 40,000 and the planning engineer's fee to 40,000 each.
And I'll second that.
Everybody in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed?
Opposed?
Laura?
I'm just confused. are we gonna do the same to the other side, to the page 4
Yes.
side?
Yes.
Okay, and will we take into, because I still didn't figure out where the
Um,
evening out. If the revenue side has 190 and then Tom found, and then Sean found more on the,
Well, maybe we
Minus
should have
side.
one motion that encompasses them both, because this would reduce the beginning balance by $50,000, correct? No, it would reduce the beginning, because you said you had $50,000 of this money rolled into that, into the beginning balance. So what is this going to affect? By reducing both of these to $40,000, a total of $80,000. Currently, it's budgeted at $290,000. So do you wanna do 45, so it's an even amount?
Just get close to what it's been the last 5 years, is I'm perfectly happy.
Anybody object to changing that to 45? So we're just taking $200,000 out of the revenues doing that. Lance?
Didn't we just vote and pass the motion?
Yes, we did.
The 40,000.
Okay, $40,000.
So, are you asking that we
No.
change our vote?
No, I withdraw my,
Okay.
I think she was addressing me because I was confused.
right, and I should have called for question beforehand. Okay, now this affects this affects what we've done as far as the expenses go. Now, Mary Ann, could you tell us the ramifications of this? Will we reduce both contract services and engineering to the same amounts? And then change the beginning balance by $50,000? Does that fix it?
You can't, in my mind, you can't have a pass-through on planning, otherwise we won't have any money for our planner. Because if we get money for a planner from a contractor and pay the planner, that's a pass-through. But are you saying that within that 40,000 that we pay our planner also out of that 40,000? Is that what I'm understanding? Because
Kevin?
I'm kind of lost myself.
Well, I believe in looking at it, that looks like what you do right now, though, right? If you go down to the contract services planning, and there's current this year $13,525 in expense, that's money we paid the planner for doing work for us, and work that's been done for other people as well, right?
Yes.
So they are combined already. So if there's a placeholder for $40,000 in revenue and a
Oh, I
placeholder
see.
for $40,000
Yes.
in expenditures, it doesn't really make any difference.
But that does reduce the beginning balance, because you said that,
It doesn't affect you.
It doesn't affect the beginning balance. I've already taken,
I thought that $50,000 accounted for part of that discrepancy. The problem I've got here is you've got,
Right.
for revenues, you've got 290,000, but on the other part of your pass-through, you've got 255,000. So there's a discrepancy there, and I thought that $50,000 you said was reflected in the beginning balance. That's why changing these numbers would have to change that number. Kevin?
Contracting, I think she was talking about the refund of the
Yeah.
construction costs, which was the 2,000 she was referring to. And
Yes.
that's actually a question I wanted to ask to make sure I was understanding your explanation right.
Right.
That's
well,
why
where's the
the
other 60 then?
budgeted, the beginning balance is reduced.
yes,
so
because
greatly from last year.
I have to, before the end of this fiscal year, take that out of the beginning balance and put it into a liability, which is gonna reduce my beginning balance at the end of June, which I have to carry forward to the new year.
So I see a difference of $60,000. And you said the actual amount owed is
I
17,000?
believe it's 17, I'd have to pull my
So
paperwork
I
to make
guess
sure.
this 50,000 is included in this budgeted beginning balance for
Again, that
11.
50,000 was a placeholder
Okay, I
and
understand,
not,
but it's not real money, but it was
No.
included in that total. And that's how we get to the proposed beginning balance
Yes.
for this budget
Yes.
cycle of 50,000.
yes.
that has to be reduced for reducing the revenues.
If you're reducing the planning fees and the engineering estimate revenues, you need to reduce the expenses by the same amount, making it 40,000, 40,000. If I understand correctly what you're asking to do. Is that correct?
That's what I thought we were talking about. I think this other thing is a separate issue from, this is a separate issue from the pass-throughs.
Tiffany?
But you have 15,
I'm not getting it.
I know, it's so confusing.
Oh, but I know because of that.
Marianne,
Yes,
but you have 15,000 budgeted extra for the contract service planning for city business, right, on page 4. So,
yes.
okay, so that would now need to be 55,000, right?
If they want, that is the ideal situation, yes. That tells me I have $15,000 to spend on a planner. The 40,000 is a pass-through.
So I think the confusion is if we reduce this, the planning engineer estimates to 40,000, that there's a reduction of 110,000, but you've only got 100,000 in the contract service for engineers, so now we're at a deficit of $10,000. Do you understand the confusion on that?
Now we're at a deficit of 10,000.
Okay, so if we go back here and we're taking out, we're making the planning engineer estimates
I
100.
see what you're saying.
Okay.
40,000
We're making it
each.
$40,000, so that means we're reducing it $110,000, and we go to page 4 and we only have contract service engineering for $100,000, and we're $10,000 in the hole.
I see.
That's the confusion, that's where all this confusion is coming from.
So
So
what
that because-
else does that reduce?
Yeah, because there's,
Where did that money go? I'm still, it's kind of the same question, where did it flow through to?
I think she's trying to find a message.
Thank you, Tiffany. Appreciate that.
Do you need a break so you can look at that?
We can take a break now,
Good
Mary Ann.
idea.
Bye.
Good.
I'm totally
take a break
confused, so
now.
yeah, I would recommend that.
We'll have a
Because I,
5 or 6 or
That was
7
where the
minute break.
confusion was, is that you say it's a pass-through, but there's not, the numbers aren't there. That's,
because
Those two.
but,
It doesn't balance as a pass-through.
yes, I understand that.
It was suggested that possibly you need 2 line items, one to reflect the city's projected engineering costs, and the other one as pass-through. They don't seem to be the same thing. Since the city absorbs their own costs, that can't be considered a pass-through. And so it really shouldn't be in the same category as a pass-through, it would seem to me. Does anybody else agree with that?
Well, it would simplify things.
I believe
I'd like to hear a motion that asks for 2 additional line items, and those would be line items to reflect the city's anticipated expense and not include those in a pass-through. And that would both affect that would not affect the revenues, that would affect the expenses.
I'll make that motion.
You'll make that motion?
Yep.
Do you understand the motion?
I'll second it.
Okay. That motion was made by Tiffany Pruitt and seconded by Gaia Hay. Everybody in favor, please say aye.
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 Anybody opposed?
I,
Sean, do you want?
I'm opposed because I think the budget officer who did this budget and put it together should be here answering these questions, and Mary Ann's a transcriber, but I would like to know from the budget officer the rationale behind this, so that we're better informed. I don't feel informed, and I don't feel Mary Ann's the one who's supposed to be answering the questions.
Explain why he's not here.
I agree with that to a certain extent. He isn't here apparently for a medical reason, and so he wasn't able to come tonight.
I just think that he set the budget up, so I think it's his responsibility to answer the questions. I'm sorry he's ill and all, but that's just my feeling on it. It's not Mary Ann's responsibility necessarily, because he set it up and I want to know his rationale.
Right, I would have liked to have personally seen a staff report regarding what we were going to be discussing tonight, but that's not something that has been forthcoming, and so, you know, we've had to go without that aid. I also would like to see, at some point, some kind of a suggestion by by the budget officer, on how we can possibly handle the debt that we have. Lance?
I just want to change my vote to no.
Okay, and do you want to say why?
Same reason Shauna convinced me.
Okay. I'm not sure that changing your vote like that is really the thing to do, but
Yeah, it is.
that's fine with me. Okay, well, some people are allowed to change their vote and others aren't, apparently.
Well, until you've announced the result, anyone's allowed to change their vote.
He's right, you need to announce to the recorder
That there's been a
ballot
change.
no. Until you tell the recorder that there was 11 yeses and 2 noes, or whatever the tally was, any person's allowed to change their vote.
Oh, okay. Okay, so will you please reflect Lance's change
Thank you.
in the tally? You're welcome.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
so then just say the motion carries.
motion carries. Okay, thank you, everybody.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
can I ask Mary Ann a question?
please.
Mary Ann, the budget, just out of curiosity, I know Richard isn't here tonight. Do you pretty much develop this budget and then give it to Richard to go through and do revises?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Don.
just to clarify why I even brought it up, and it was, I saw no need to reflect probably 3 times what we've ever spent. That's my only reason, and to be realistic, that's the only reason I brought it up.
Well, obviously, the majority of the committee agreed with you, Don. Mary Ann?
Madam Chair, may I clarify my answer to Budget Committee Member Fisher? When I say I prepare this budget, I do this based on talking to the budget, talking to the city administrator, and getting his point of view. I put the numbers in, and if I don't balance, we go through and we do our best to balance it to get a balanced budget to the Budget Committee. We do talk about these numbers and come to conclusions. Some of these numbers are automatic, like the property taxes, the internal payments. Some of those are just from the other
Right.
funds. As far as this, the engineering and thing, I was just told to move them aside,
No, I
to move them
understand.
over. I will say we didn't discuss those. They thought they balanced, but obviously I have an issue, so.
And you also go through with the department heads.
The department heads give me
As
their
well.
budgets, and I plug them
And you
into
plug them in,
the
right.
matrix, and then the city administrator, myself, and the budget, or the department heads go over their budget, yes.
Right, okay.
But in this case, the department head is,
Well, the department head is the city administrator
yeah.
for the general fund.
Are you done?
Yes, I'm done.
Okay, thank you. I'd also like to mention that the use of city property, we changed that in regard, we deducted the street, and that was, does anybody remember exactly?
$4,300,
How much?
$4,300,
$4,300
yes,
from the $39,000.
yes,
It's a minus 43.
from minus
George?
Actually, I just have another question. So, Mary Ann, on page 1, next week, can we get a revised sheet that shows what the actual totals and what it's actually supposed to be, what the
With-
grand total will be? because I'm looking at that, our grand total's gonna be somewhere around 546,000, once you do all these other additions and
I
subtractions.
can provide a changed general fund based on what the budget committee has done up to now, yes, which includes the not museum, but the government relations, the potlatch, the, yes, I can provide.
There's just a lot of changes on this
There's a lot
line.
of changes
Yeah.
throughout the general fund already.
Right.
And-
Thank you.
And the $50,000 beginning balance, is that a realistic beginning balance?
I believe it is.
And the beginning balance last year was,
111.
and this year it's 50?
Mhm. Again, I can have Budget Officer Carson and myself look it over to make sure that he's in agreement with me, but, and make sure that we are in agreement, if that's what you so desire.
Okay.
Tiffany?
Okay, so we still have the issue of the engineer, the planning engineer estimates, that's probably something Mary Ann's gonna have to look out, because somewhere there's $50,000 that's, we don't know what the answer is. Because to me, it seems that it works with the refrain construction deposits, but, she's insistent that it needs to be removed from the beginning balance, so I don't know, I don't know.
If you remove it from the beginning balance, there's nothing left.
Well,
I've already removed it from
she's
the
already
beginning
removed it,
balance.
so that's why we have nothing there.
I see. Okay. In looking at the revenues, are there any other sources of revenue here, Mary Ann, that are not absolutely real, besides the planning fees and the planning engineering estimates? The rest are solid.
Miscellaneous revenue is not a solid figure.
What does that
That's an
encompass?
estimate of revenue that
It looks very approximate, though.
it is
according-
approximate. I try to keep it fairly close to what the history is. Copy machine revenue and fax machine revenue is based on what we get in from citizens when they need copies or faxes.
Got it.
I was just wondering, if the property taxes are going to, do you think remain about the same?
I got these numbers from the county. They sent me a property value of 72 million of the city, so I got that from them, and so I feel that that's comfortable.
Got a hand up.
I'm sorry, George? Oh, Lance.
How about the use of city property? Is that, I mean, it looks like it's one of those that's been carried through at the same amount every year in revenue, but then current through, January, it's not up to that?
It's the same amount every month that is charged to the various utilities.
So that is an accurate amount?
Yes. Minus the 4,300 from street.
That is affected by the change we made in not charging the streets use of city property. That reduced revenues by $4,300. Okay. Now, in scrutinizing the expenses,
Excuse me?
yes,
I had a question still on that.
sure.
On the state revenue sharing, I was just wondering if we could squeeze out another couple thousand. We've got it down to 6,000. It looks like historically we've made over 8.
That comes from the state. I never know from year to year. Sometimes it could be more, sometimes it could be less. I've been budgeting 6,000 over the past 3 years. Yes, we've gotten more over the last 2 years. It's an educated guess, and,
Could you explain the source of state revenue sharing, Mary Ann? Do you-
state revenue comes from the state. I get it periodically. It's an and I guess I can explain it the best I can. We get liquor tax, street tax, cigarette tax, and then they have a little thing called state revenue sharing. And we get a percentage based on our population. That's the best
So it depends on the state's revenue, how
Yes.
much
Yes.
we realize there. And that is the fund that we budgeted in our, one of our earlier meetings, and we
Yes.
changed from the library to the recreation. That was $6,000 there. And, Shauna,
Mary Ann, just curious, it's probably a dumb question, but fiscal year 08-09, the 980,000, that was a transfer from other funds. What was that about?
That was the close of the Capital Reserve Fund 55.
yeah, too bad we don't have a few more of those funds to transfer.
Okay, so
Tiffany?
it doesn't, I don't know what we do with the material and services part of this until we can figure out where that,
Discrepancy is?
yeah.
Well, that's true, because we're talking about budgeting away, income here that may be budgeted for in that missing $50,000. And we don't wanna spend more than we have. Do you wanna table this until we can get an answer on that issue? Kevin?
Just a note on page 2, the administrator auto allowance. That's going to come out, I mean, we've been taking that out of the other funds, that's gonna come out of the, removed from this fund as well, right?
If that is the wish of the council, I mean,
I mean,
you have been removing it from the other funds.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that,
Sure.
that we're gonna just eliminate that.
Mhm.
That is in, we don't have that in planning, we're not doing that department tonight, actually. But I don't have any objections to doing it, though, it wasn't
It
on
is
the
in planning,
agenda.
actually, on page 2,
Oh, it
Yeah.
is? Okay.
and I was just trying to be consistent, that we've
Oh.
eliminated it from, as we've
Oh,
gone along.
absolutely.
So it's gone.
And then on page 4 also, $248.
Madam Chair, I believe when you guys did that, you did it for the fund that you were doing, not for this fund, so in my mind, I think you need to have a vote to remove those.
Well, I
Is that
would,
my understanding?
like to, ask for a motion to remove the administrator auto allowance from the planning department. We have an ordinance enforcement office, we have an ordinance enforcement car that serves that purpose. Evan?
I'm fine with that, but I believe that not having the auto allowance is actually a policy that we've had for the last couple of years. And it revolved around having the OEO card. So I mean, it's fine to vote. I think I would rather vote to remove the auto allowance from the entire budget as opposed to doing this every
I
single.
agree with that. And it hasn't been budgeted.
It was something
the
that was
last-
just, yeah, it hasn't been, and that's what I'm saying is it's been a policy for the past several years that's been added in. And Mr. Carson had requested it be put back in, but I don't think he brought that to the council for their input.
Now, you did, you said that was also on page 2? Oh, right here, okay.
It's on page 2 and page 4.
Okay, so that eliminates 2 expenses from the general fund. One There's probably more, isn't there?
This is not.
No, it's what Kevin said. It
Okay.
is in plan, but he's referenced.
Say, Madam Chair.
Lance,
Okay, so we talked about the, on page 2, the administrator auto allowance, but, and that's, the way I read it, that says Department 1 administration, whereas planning is Department 2.
that's correct.
So, Kevin, you're referencing page 2, but are you really referring to, on page 4 there for, under Department 2, planning, where it's 240?
Actually, what I'm really trying to get to is.
Just the big picture?
Is that,
Yeah.
as a policy, we haven't been paying an administrator auto allowance for the past several years. This was added in by the interim administrator. I would like to have, I would like to remove it from the entire budget period. From all
Second
funds.
that.
I have a motion by Kevin Benson saying that, asking to remove the auto allowance from all funds as per the current policy. Is there a second?
I second.
Tiffany Pruitt seconded. Everybody in favor, please say aye.
Can we have discussion first?
Oh, question? Yes, Lance?
So, if there's a policy that says we don't do this, why was it put into the budget? Does anyone have the answer for that?
Mary Ann's answered that in one of the previous budget committees, but we'd be happy to go over it again. And that's that, Rich asked that this be added back in, and Mary Ann accommodated him. It had not been approved by council.
So how's it getting spent? I guess that's what I'm trying to get. It was put back in, but is it an auto allowance because we're buying a car? Or
I'll give you a history if you like.
Mary Ann?
When the city administrator, the previous city administrator was first hired, he was, in his contract, was given an auto allowance. And then as progression in the next year, because we had the OEO car, then he requested it be, instead of an auto allowance, he would forego the auto allowance, and instead of having health insurance, he would like it to become deferred comp allowance. So we've eliminated that from his contract. It was the discussion with city administrator, or the interim Carson, that perhaps the new city administrator, we should budget for it in case that was a contract negotiation, whatever. We do have the OEO car for anybody to use, so that's how it originally came about. It was a part of the contract for the previous city administrator.
Mary Ann, do you remember, did we remove that from all three of the other funds that we addressed, the streets, the water, and the sewer, and rebudget for those amounts?
I don't have it documented in a street that you removed it because I don't know as you went over personal services in streets. I don't have any notes on that. I only believe you went over materials and services, not personal services, not personnel.
I thought that that was something that we discussed then.
I do too.
Laura?
Well,
Lance?
either way, would Kevin's motion cover that?
Yes.
It would, although I'd like to be able to keep track of the changes that we've made in the various funds, so when we get back to them, we don't have oversight.
So are you saying that your preference is to remove the administrator auto allowance department by department rather than in one motion?
You move them all with one motion, but it affects every department. That revenue that was budgeted for that purpose has to be rebudgeted in order for it to balance.
So are you saying that you'd rather do it department by department rather than
No,
in one
I'm
time?
not saying that at all. I'm saying we need to keep track of it department by department so we can re-budget the revenues that we're not spending on auto allowance. You understand?
Sure.
Laura? Excuse me.
Of the minutes for May 18th, 2011, page 5 in the middle is the discussion of Benson asking these questions to the guy involved.
It talks about the streets.
It talks about the auto thing y'all were asking about, the auto car, and I don't see where it's recorded here, I'm just like skimming it, but where, it shows where he's asking how that came into play, but I don't see where it's actually saying, let's take it out all the funds. I think there was some discussion, but it's not recorded.
What page is streets on? Does anybody know? Offhand?
Say that in a minute.
Yes.
Well,
Isn't
Kevin?
it kind of really irrelevant at this point, if we're gonna have a motion to remove from all the funds? Can I would like to amend my motion, and that is if it hasn't been addressed in that fund, that the money go to the beginning balance. That way, everything will balance. The auto allowance, if there's auto allowance in the fund, that it be transferred to the beginning balance, and that way, it will be clean, everything will balance.
Does that work,
We'll have to go
Mary
back
Ann?
and find all of them again.
The beginning balance is from this
That's
budget
revenue.
year. There's no budget for auto allowance in this budget year. I don't see how you can put it in beginning balance for the upcoming year. It's not part of,
Well, ending
The-
balance.
ending balance is fine, he said beginning balance.
Ending balance.
Ending balance, yeah, would become
Okay, but
next
it
year's
needs to-
beginning balance.
It needs to go into a line item.
You already carried over.
If you deduct it, if you're taking it out of an expenditure line item, which you are, then your revenues and expenditures don't balance.
That's what I'm trying to get to.
So how can you put it in beginning balance when the beginning balance is from this year, not current, not
I get you.
next year?
So would you have a suggestion for where,
You need to offset it
for
with an
example,
expense.
on page 2, administrator auto allowance, $480. If that $480 was removed as an expenditure, where are we going to allocate that money to as an expenditure to make this continue to balance?
In my mind, there's no more revenues,
We're not changing the revenue.
okay, then you would have to put it in contingency.
Okay.
I mean, either that or capital reserve, I mean, isn't that,
Contingency's fine.
Now, all of the funds that we take an auto allowance out of don't have contingencies,
correct.
do they?
that, the cemetery doesn't get charged auto allowance. I'm sorry, it doesn't get charged auto allowance.
Hold on, Brian.
How about extra labor?
They lost their
Maybe
license.
we should get a verse.
Well, they have a contingency line item, yes.
So then, would you like to change that, that it be added to contingency, Kevin? Those expenditures? Or should we address this fund by fund?
Whichever is gonna be easiest for Mary Ann. I didn't want us to end up with several funds that didn't balance and then not realizing why they didn't balance at the end of the season.
Right, then that
Do it
was
all
my
at once,
concern,
at one
too.
time, it makes more sense to me.
George?
Madam Chair, I think it would be easier to say that we are going to eliminate the auto allowance in every fund, and to have Mary Ann adjust every fund according to that fund, how it needs to be adjusted properly.
We need to find some place to put that money from each fund in order for her to balance.
Right, and I'm recommending that we allow her to do that in each and every fund, because each fund is different. Some have contingency, some doesn't. So we'll just allow her to make sure that that money's credited to each fund. Does that sound adequate?
Let's ask Mary Ann.
I can do that, and as we go back through the funds, I can tell you,
Where it's
inform you where
gone.
it's going, sure.
Okay.
That's no problem.
So if we just have that 480, we'll ask you where you put that, and you'll be able to tell us.
Because I will have to look over this general fund and bring it back to you.
Kevin?
Well, I mean, part of the issue is we have the debt to service.
Mhm.
Maybe this money can go towards paying part of the loans. That's really one of the,
Is to end up with less of the general fund being transferred into these various departments for expense.
these are general fund departments.
Right.
So what's your motion?
Kevin, did you want to rephrase your motion to include the rebudgeting?
Redisposition.
Or do we need a new motion?
Maybe we should wait, maybe I will withdraw my motion and we'll wait until we address the payment, the loan payments, and then we can allocate it to that.
Okay, we'll wait
Sure.
for the allocation.
Okay.
I'll
That's
withdraw
fine.
my motion.
And just keep that money as so far unspent revenues. Okay. Now, under expenses, back to our planning department.
Which page are you on again? 4.
Four. Tiffany?
Are we just line item expensing, or are we?
Yeah.
Because she's gonna have to redo this and bring it back to us.
Exactly, but are there any other changes or questions about any of the other expenses that we'd like Mary Ann to change? We don't want to give her this piecemeal. Kevin?
So we're on.
We're on page 4.
Okay. Again, in the interest of finding money to pay the payments we need for the loans, travel and training shows an average of about $350 in this, on this particular one. There's a budget amount of 5,000 or 2,000?
Yeah.
I crossed that right, so yeah, 2,000. That's one, I think, where there could be some money, again, to help service the debt that we have.
What is the dues, publication, and notices? That includes the newspaper, Mary Ann?
Yes, it does. Planning notices for planning commission meetings come out of that line item. Any publications that we might belong to, like a planning paper or anything comes out of there. And then any dues that we have regarding membership to any planning I think there's one planning, any membership dues, best I can explain it.
And the camera operation, what does that entail? Because I noticed that being charged off across the board. So, and I also noticed that the actual in 910 was only $214. It's $163 through 131. Yet we have $1,000 budgeted. It looks like we could budget more conservatively there and get, pick up some revenues there as well.
The
Mary Ann.
camera operation is an estimate, because we don't know how many planning committee meetings they're gonna have. We kinda estimate based on that. If there's planning issues and they have more than one meeting a month, that our camera operation expense goes out. It is, has been, I should say, part of the council's decision to televise all of our meetings, so that's what we're trying to cover the cost of.
Well, it would be my suggestion that we whittle that down the same way we whittled the other down. It doesn't seem realistic for what we've got on our calendar for planning right now. And like I say, the actual in 2009-10 was $214.56, and the current through now is $163.44. So is anybody interested in making, and I see this as being, $500 at least that we could use towards the payment of our bills. Does anybody have a motion that they'd like to make that a smaller amount than $1,000?
I'll make a motion that we reduce the camera operation on this line to $500.
That motion has been made by Don Haight, and it was seconded by Eva? Oh, Guida Haight. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? That, who? Bobby? Is there a reason?
My reason is because as part of the planning commission, before we were put on hiatus, we had a pretty aggressive schedule of getting some things done. We were given a list of tasks to do by our then city planner. And so we did have a lot of meetings. And so although $500 might be sufficient, I would rather be a little more conservative and put more money in that. We're talking about $500, but I would really like to see us continue to get the work done that the planning commission was given.
Kevin?
I'd just like to, just to point out that it's twice as much as the last full fiscal year, and almost four times as much as correct as your current through half of this year. So I mean, you would know better than me, but.
Yeah, and I understand that. We were given the list in the last fiscal year, and then part of that fiscal year, once we were without a planner, a city planner, that was stopped. So that's my reason, Madam Chair.
Don?
Just a question. How does our attorney figure, is that more, less? How does that compare with last year on this line?
Excuse me, that motion passed and with one person in opposition, Bobby Walker.
Excuse me.
I'm sorry,
That's
Don,
okay.
I forgot to do that.
Okay. I'm just curious, are we kind of within line of what it's been the last year?
Are we now talking the attorney?
On attorney portion, is it?
No.
No, the current year that we're in, we are over budget on attorney fees. Attorney, I believe I'm budgeting 37,000 total for attorney fees, to be spread out throughout the funds.
And what was the total this year?
So far, I believe the total is around
A bunch.
44,000, maybe a little bit more.
Well, again, you ding the funds, that percentage, if there are overruns. I would like to see, a recommendation by the budget committee because, contract services attorney, 2,236, there's no assurance that it's going to stop at $2,236, and they're absorbing expenses that aren't related to planning in some cases. And in some cases, they're not absorbing their entire share. Like particularly in the last year or so, planning has had very high attorneys' bills. And every one of our utilities gets dinged as a consequence. I would like to see before our process is over that we could make a recommendation to council to take a strong look at that policy. And one of the things I asked Rich for personally is to establish what the policy and the division of those costs, where that policy came from. Is that a council policy that's been passed down through the years? Or is that a staff policy or a budget committee attorney policy. I don't think we really have an answer to that until we can see how this policy was established and where it says that this is the division. I have problems with taking out of the electric company or the water company or the street company for planning bills, and I'm not sure, we have a new planner now, but with as litigious as everything was around here for years, I'm sure they have not been paying their share of planning, of the attorney's bills. So, I'd like to hear people's comments on how they feel about how the attorney's bills are being handled. Laura?
So I think I'm agreeing with your point. We don't know why we spread them out, why we do it the way we do, and we want clarification as to. And then I would also just want to know why we didn't charge the department for, if that department used the attorney, why not charge the department that used it, so it'd be at least transparent as to what attorney fees were.
And there's some questions in that regard. Since attorney's fees on planning are supposed to be passed through, why were the planning fees charged to our various departments as far as the attorney goes? George?
Madam Chair, just so you understand that when a planner looks at something, if there's certain things that the planner has to do that's job specific. You know, if a contractor comes in and he says he wants to do these things, okay? That just because he's doing these things does not mean that the city's not liable for the planner to do some things that are involved with the city to make sure that we can do the items for the contractor who's doing his thing. So, you know, it might be that 90% of the planner's cost is passed through, and 10% is actually part of the city's responsibility to take care of, just so you know. Okay. And there can be a separation there at times where the planner could be actually doing more work for the planner than what it's, for the city than what he's doing for the contractor.
Well, I don't see two line items there either, like we were talking about in the other instance for contract service attorney, that is a pass-through, and then contract service attorney that isn't. Because if there are pass-through charges, I definitely would like to see those reflected as pass-through charges, and not those charges made throughout our various funds. Does that make sense, what I just said? So, does anybody have any feelings on the amount that's been budgeted for this year, 2,236? Or do you think we should wait until we get into the whole picture? George?
Actually, if you go back and look at the past averages, you know, it looks like we're a little bit low, but we might be pretty close, you know, but knowing the fact that we went over, you know, I would say that should increase a little bit, just to be on the safe side, because unfortunately, attorneys are not cheap.
I agree with that.
So I'd say that we should at least make it up to $3,000.
Bobby?
Well, I agree, in being on the planning commission, the last 3 or 4 years have, as you mentioned, been very litigious, and so, you know, this amount of money that's in here now
Nothing.
is not gonna get you, you're talking about 6, 7 hours of work, maybe, and I don't know offhand what our city attorney charges, but you're not getting, I don't think it's set up fair.
$200 an hour, I think,
Well,
is what our attorney gets.
and you're getting 11 hours of work. That's
Not very long.
for
And the way this
plan.
is apportioned right now, Mary Ann, it's just strictly a percentage of the total anticipated bill. It's not realistic to how much fund charge, you know, is in each fund,
And we
which
have
is
seen
not
that.
understandable to me.
No, and I would agree that it's like, for instance, the street department is being charged for the lawyer,
Exactly.
probably in the same amount. And
Right. And that's why I think also it's very important for this committee to make a strong recommendation to the city council, because this is something, you know, I would like to have some, like I say, legislative history on how this was determined. Because if this is a budget committee, decision, we can make this decision. But if this has been a council decision, then, it's up to council to change, the status. And so, I asked Rich for that research, and it was my understanding he was going to supply that to us tonight. So we can defer, you know, this part of the conversation until next time, but I think it's definitely an unfinished subject. And that planning should absorb, we should budget properly for planning to absorb its own expenses. So our street department, our electric department, et cetera, does not have to absorb expenses that are not theirs. Tiffany?
So do we wanna change that, or are we gonna wait then?
I think that probably it needs to be, you know, we need to have that information, whether we can in fact change it. Right now, it is being assessed at a portion of the entire bill, which to me is not the way to handle it. Tiffany?
Because we haven't dealt with the travel and training, we said we were gonna reduce that, but we didn't.
Okay,
We
well,
got sidetracked, so there's money there to move, but.
well, somebody,
We should ask Bobby first, what kind of travel and training he anticipates first.
The amount you have in here now is enough for almost every person on the planning commission to go to a training. I can tell you that in my term, I've gone to one training class at Cannon Beach, and it was $200. So I agree, I think we can lower this.
by half, do you think?
Oh, at least.
My question there would be, if we were to train a staff person to take up more slack, so, you know, in the preliminary stages of the planning process, perhaps a staff person could do things instead of calling on, your planner until things were farther along. And if we did that, that would require, but that's up to the city council, of course. Kevin?
That's a different,
It is
a
different.
different line item.
But
There's travel and training for staff.
Oh,
as well
there is?
throughout the budget.
Okay. This is just strictly for the planning commission, the travel and training.
Well, could that, reduction of $1,000 then, be added to the, attorney?
No, not at this time, not until we've established whether that policy of division is a city council policy or whether it's been a budget committee policy
And are you
or
going
a staff
to,
policy.
and you're going to?
I have asked and I'll
You'll ask
follow
them
up
again.
on it,
Thank you.
right. Sherelle?
In section 5, back where the spreads are, there's a list of planned expenditures for planning training and the totals,
What page is that on, Sherelle?
Is that the last?
it's in
Section
section 5, and it says page number 1, but it's not page
It's the
number
ones
1.
that are stapled together.
Is it the handwritten one?
It's the ones that are
Is that
stapled
about
together.
page 9 or so?
Oh, yeah.
The ones that are stapled together in the back of that. The first,
Where is that?
it's right there, this is the first one. Travel and training.
So do you see there anything there that has to do with, planning at all? Oh. Travel training. No, I don't wanna be dim, but I don't wanna pretend I understand something when I don't either. Could you explain this chart a little bit on, you just referenced, Cheryl.
So the one on the left-hand side is the spread that includes the planning department. See how it says 1-2,
Right, I
that's
see
the
that.
planning department. So with all the planned expenditures, planning is actually going to expend $1,024.15.
Where is that reflected up above?
Well,
Because I don't see, it doesn't say what that is for.
so the planned training, all the things that have 2 stars next to it, 2 asterisks, those include planning. And that total for those, you'll see down in the next section is $5,300. And then we put the $5,300 into that spread that all those funds pay for.
Still don't get it.
And so you're saying that,
There's $5,300 worth of training that's going to include the planning department. Some form of planning is involved in that training.
Because some of the
And they take that total
Because-
expense and spread it throughout the departments, and the planning's share of that is $1,024.50.
Oh, so that's divided in the same way our lawyer
Because
is
they also talk
divided.
about other things. Yeah, they also, it's not just planning that they talk about, it's
And
recording.
so you're not talking about training for the planning commission, you're talking about training for city council people or whoever.
Just those 4 things, the OAMR conferences, professional development 3 for the deputy recorder, and the IIMC, International Institute for Municipal Clerks. Only those 4 things are included in the planning spread. All of those other items on the top of the list don't include planning as,
What is the International Institute for Municipal Clerks, IMC? Is that something that you attend every year, or that the clerk attends every year?
and I think it has to do with their certifications.
It has to do with their certifications, and I believe the reason IIMC is in there this year is because it's actually here in Portland. Otherwise, they don't attend it because it's so far away.
So, even though it's here in Portland, it costs $1,000?
The registration for that is very expensive.
Well, how expensive?
And you have $1,000 for conference fee, and $1,000 for meals.
So that's required yearly then? Is that what I understood?
It has to do with their certifications. They have to have, the deputy recorder and the city recorder have to maintain the municipal clerk certifications. And you have to attend so many classes to get this certification. And this is one way to go to a conference and get those classes instead of going all over Oregon to get them.
Do they offer online classes?
Sometimes they can do online, but most of to get the clerk's certificate, they have to actually attend academies, attend certain classes. They can't always do them online.
And this is a state requirement?
I have to ask Kathy and Sue. Kathy knows about the municipal clerk.
Thank you.
I personally don't see that as a legitimate planning expense. I would think that for travel and training, that would be for the planning commission.
But it's under 21, so that makes it, I'm sorry.
Oh, God, I want to talk first.
Yeah, I was just going to ask Marianne, is this a yearly or every 2 years? Do you have to attend?
I would have to defer that, ask Kathy, because I just know that she said the IIMC is in Portland this year and they should attend it. Otherwise, it's across the state, across the country usually. And they don't attend it every year, no. This is something that doesn't come this way very often.
So it doesn't, I'd like to know what's necessary for the certification, because we're going to have to cut down somewhere, and this is a potential. I'd like to know what's necessary for the certification, and if both the deputy recorder and the city recorder have to attend in the same year, and also if it can be taken online, and so we don't have the lodging and meals. I think that this kind of thing is something we can no longer afford unless it's absolutely necessary. Cheryl?
I'm sorry, I would just like to also say that $5,300, they're not only talking about planning things, they're also, it's about recording it, okay. So it has to do with all.
George?
I'd also like to mention that I know for a fact that Kathy and Sue both are involved in planning. They actually have to go through, they have to look at the permits, they have to go through them, they have to evaluate them, they have to send them to the department heads. It comes back, some things have to be notarized and sent out by Kathy or Sue. And I know that for a fact because I've been through it with both of them. So they do participate in the planning as well.
I'm sure they do. And which brings me to another question though, Sherelle, like the plannings, or was it Mary Ann? The plannings portion of this is how much did you say? 2,000?
What ends up being expense out of planning is $1,024.15, according to these plan expenditures.
According to these expenditures. Okay, so do we still want to reduce this? We can't reduce it, obviously, by $1,000, or there's not enough to cover the planning, the expenses that they have planned. Although I'd certainly like to look at all of these conferences that are planned to attend this year. I think that's one place we can look at. I remember at one point, our city recorder was the most educated city recorder in the state of Oregon. She got an award for that, if I'm not mistaken. And that's wonderful, but can we really afford to be the most educated in the whole state of Oregon? We're a town of 1,000 people. So, I think that we need to reach a happy medium.
Maybe, do we have a kind of a tracking return on investment on these kinds of things? If we train somebody, what we get back in return, how long they stay with us, et cetera?
I do know we trained 2 people on the software that was never activated. And they went away to a conference in another state. And then the software was put on the shelf and not activated. And that kind of thing, I think, that we can look at, if everybody agrees. Is there a motion to reduce the $2,000 travel and training to at least $1,500, allow some for the planning commission as well? Or Kevin, anybody? Do we want to leave it at 2,000? Laura?
I thought we needed more information to know if these are required courses, if, I mean, we can't cut them off if they have to take.
No, but we can reduce it.
Right, but shouldn't we find out first what is required and what isn't?
I agree, Madam Chair, just without the budget officer here.
Okay.
I mean,
So we'll circle that $2,000 and I'll put a question mark near it and we'll ask the budget officer and see if he can throw any light on that.
All right.
Does everybody agree with that? Okay. Is there anything else that anybody feels we can scrutinize tonight? Regarding planning?
Regarding planning. Are we done?
Okay, now we're going to move to property, Department 4, page 5.
Question before you do that.
Yes,
Okay.
please.
There was a motion and a vote, maybe an hour and a half ago about changing the, I don't remember if it was on page 1 or page 4, but the planning fees and engineering fees, to $40,000.
Yeah.
And then we sort of bird walked away from that. And then there was another vote about having a separate line item for the city expense. But I don't believe we actually, once we changed one, it was either page 1 or page 4, we didn't change the other. And by doing that, we created an imbalance, so.
We did create an imbalance, but if I remember correctly, we had decided that Mary Ann needs to account for the $50,000 before we can correct it.
So my question is, that right now, we've changed either revenues or expenditures
It's
to
unbalanced.
40,000, so, is the plan just to leave it that way for now?
For now.
And people are comfortable with
We
that.
need information before we can proceed.
Marianne's
Any
gonna
other
get that for us.
questions? Okay, would you please turn to page 5, and we're going to start on property, and we need to have a motion to continue or a motion to continue the meeting until the next time. Before we adjourn, and I'd like to take time to do this now, we need to take this opportunity to set some extra meetings for the month of June. And there's been some preliminary discussion. I've tried to contact committee members and find out what a good day for the second meeting a week would be in June. And Friday seems to be suitable with the majority. I'd like to ask individuals, we need to set 2 meetings the first week of June and the second week of June. Additional.
What dates do you have?
The 3rd and the 10th.
The 3rd and the 10th. And so I'd like to go around the room and see if those dates are acceptable with our budget committee members. Kevin, is that acceptable to you?
Which dates again?
The 3rd and the 10th, they're Fridays,
They're both Fridays.
both Fridays, the first 2 Fridays in June.
Personally, Friday's the worst day for me, but, I mean,
They are?
every day's gonna be a bad day for somebody, so I can probably work on a Friday.
Oh, well, Friday night's not a great night for anybody. That's usually a relaxation night after a hard week, but,
Those are busiest nights.
if there are any other suggestions that works for more people, that's fine with me. Bobby?
I'm in the same boat. Why was it Friday? I mean, as opposed to?
It was just
the second and the
suggested
ninth?
by one person, and it was okay with me, and then another person said it was okay with them, and I'm not opposed to, if you have another suggestion, as long as it doesn't conflict with something that's already scheduled for this room.
I would propose Thursday the 2nd and Thursday the 9th as opposed to Friday.
Is that
Uh,
court meeting?
Now, the only problem, and this is just what I'm gonna say, is if we have meetings back to back, we don't give Mary Ann any time to work on them, to get anything done and ready and back to us in time. So we have to give a little consideration to Mary Ann to be able to accommodate us. That's the only difficult part to having a meeting back to back.
There is a conflict with the port meeting on Thursday as well. Shauna, how do you feel? Tom,
I'm good.
you're able to make it? And
Oh, good.
Laura? You better. Laura, yes? Eva?
Yeah, I think I can work it in, I just have to make sure I'm okay with work.
Okay, thank you. And,
I'm fine.
okay, Ida? Lance?
I like the idea of Thursdays better, and though I understand the concern about going back to back, I just wonder if we're trying to just make progress through different funds, if we can't have those separate agendas, but then recognize we're not expecting, for example, if we were to have a meeting tomorrow night, we wouldn't expect Mary Ann to come back with a change for the questions we just raised in planning. But we could still move on, let's say, to property and then so on. So at least we start getting through more in a week.
George?
I want to ask Mary Ann a question. What's your feeling about this?
Never.
Well, what about the conflict with the port? I mean, that is an issue. There's a port meeting in this room, scheduled on one of those nights.
On the 1st and 3rd Thursday.
Mhm.
It's up to you guys. I will schedule whatever I need to do.
We
All right.
did have quite a few
I don't,
changes.
I don't have a life right now, so.
But
Well,
I mean, all I can do is the best job I can to get the changes back to you, that's all I can say.
And I appreciate your effort.
I
Thank you
can just do
very
the
much.
best job I can.
and I'm just going to tell you that I'm retired. and I can be here any day of the week, so,
Okay, and Don?
doesn't
I
matter.
help him be retired.
Okay, Tiffany?
Fridays are good for me.
And
Thursdays are
Friday,
good.
Thursdays are impossible for Tiffany, I know that, because I know her family and her daughter's schedule on Thursday. So,
How about
well,
a
we'll
Tuesday?
just-
A Tuesday?
Tuesdays, but that's still not very much time for information again, so.
Well, maybe we could
Versus
do
2 days?
one Tuesday and one Friday.
Well, I think that would be a good idea if you want the truth. Could we want to schedule one for Tuesday and then we'll consider Friday at that time and maybe it won't be necessary?
That'd be a good
What do you think
idea.
about that? Is a Tuesday really, really
She's
bad
good with
for
anything.
anybody?
Same
All
day.
I can do is try and give you the information that you're requesting. I mean,
I don't know, I'll have to see.
Would, what's the preference of the committee? I'm not allowed to make motions, so somebody else needs to do it. Bobby?
Well, Madam Chair, we're past 9 o'clock, so we're breaking our own.
Okay, so should we continue or make a motion to continue?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to continue until 9:20.
Second,
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed?
Propose?
Okay, now let's get back.
I don't
to
wanna
our-
say why.
Okay, you don't have to say why. I'm happy not to hear. Okay, let's get back to the discussion on when our next meeting is. Would you like to set one on Tuesday? And then if it's not necessary to have one on Friday, we wouldn't have to. But tentatively, put one on Tuesday, put one on Wednesday. Okay, we'll leave it on Wednesday and then Friday. Or, I don't know.
Friday the third.
Huh?
Friday the third.
Friday the third. Friday the third, because I really do think that, Tuesday would be pushing it at this time, because we've asked a lot of Mary Ann, and Rich has, been asked a lot that he hasn't provided yet, and hopefully there was nothing left here, so hopefully he will provide that before the next meeting.
Okay, so we're gonna do Friday the 3rd.
Friday the third,
And
and
then we'll
also the following Friday, but we could consider on Friday the third of changing that until Tuesday.
Okay.
If we don't like the way Friday. Everybody in favor of having a meeting on Friday the third, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed?
Oppose?
Noted, Lance is opposed. And, somebody have a motion to, are there other subjects you'd like to talk about tonight?
what funds would you be
Oh,
going over?
property, okay. I guess we can try.
And we need to, what funds we're gonna discuss at the next meeting.
Okay.
Well,
Well, maybe we better do that now.
Let's see what we get through first, sure.
Okay. Okay.
Doing property?
Yeah,
I have a question.
Tiffany.
Marion, on this property, is, property is the only one that gets charged for utilities?
Yes. For the general fund, yes.
For the general fund?
Because property is property.
Okay, and nobody has to, there's no formula for everybody to pay their share for the utilities that they might use?
There is a spread for the city hall utility use, but all the other, and that, I don't know that it's included in here, but it's a small spread that includes, general, which is property, water, sewer, and electric, and cable TV. And they all pay the utilities just for the city hall building, but all the other utility bills go to their respective department, or funds.
Okay, again, we kind of have that same question as was that decided to spread that out. And streets doesn't get any of that utility bill. We already went through streets, but I don't remember it getting a utility bill. Shauna,
I'm just looking at page 5, the spring cleanup costs, fall cleanup costs.
Guida,
To follow up on.
okay, I'm sorry.
Just to follow up on that, and what does that include? I would like to know that. As well as the miscellaneous contract for parks.
Mary Ann, is that the whole amount on that?
For the spring cleanup?
Yes.
The spring cleanup and the fall cleanup covers any additional bins that we need to order,
Any
at the
what?
additional bins, you know, the big bins that we have out of the dump, for dump. And then we have to pay a fee for them to come and pick up all the bins. And this is a property line item that Public Works is familiar with and what the costs actually are coming in at. Spring cleanup is a little bit more than fall cleanup, as you can see, because of the amount of bins that we need to order. We get so many bins with our contract with the garbage service, and I want to say it's 6.
Lance has.
That was just what I was gonna say, is the garbage service provides a lot of those costs, and that reduces the cost of the city, just by dropping them off and picking them up for us.
Don?
But that's for, we have some equipment charge in that too, don't we? The city does. So there is some equipment cost for picking up stuff where they take the backhoe around, isn't it, too?
Driving around and picking up, people put stuff on the curb and they drive, staff drives around and picks it up.
That's just in spring, isn't it?
Those costs are not reflected in here.
Oh, they're not.
If you had, no, equipment costs are not reflected in there, no.
Why is office furniture reflected in there? That seems to me like that's furnishing, not,
For chairs, for property, office restroom cabinets, we're trying to get cabinets for the restroom in there.
okay.
It's for any of these things that we need to replace.
And I didn't see something else budgeted for that somewhere else? Like for office furniture?
I think it was a desk. Isn't there a desk?
There's a desk in capital reserve for the receptionist that,
Oh, okay. Well, that's not much. Is that the total cost of maintenance for city property, like this building included? Because I see this building crumbling, literally. And wouldn't that expense be under property? Property maintenance
Property maintenance and
and
materials.
materials.
So that would include painting.
Where does that figure come from? Is that a proposed work plan?
again, this is from the Public Works Department, okay?
Okay,
Madam Chair.
so,
Madam Chair, I know it's on the next page, or you could look in the next page, because you got capital outlays, and that refers to some of the things that need to be remodeled or taken care of too. So, I know there's maintenance materials, but then there's also improvements. You see what I'm trying to say?
I do, but I
Yeah.
don't see how they correlate to each other, or how are they connected, or are they the same thing? So does that mean that a total of the 5750 plus the 3,000 plus the 700, no, that's different, okay. Does that mean that that is the cost of the repairs or the maintenance that you plan on doing to the buildings in totality?
I don't have a list of the maintenance that they're gonna do.
No.
That comes from Public Works.
Okay,
I heard that.
George?
Again, I want to bring up a couple of things, just so you realize it. You know, it's like the $5,700 here. There's, you know, to date, there was 3,200. The year before, there was 5,000. Something that I don't know if a lot of people are aware of, but the gymnasium floor down here is going to have to be refinished in the very near future, and that's going to cost, just for material costs, it's going to cost about $3,000 just to buy all the varnish to revarnish the basketball floor. If it doesn't get taken care of, the wood will be to such a state that the whole floor will have to be replaced.
I think things
So
should
that's an issue of something that, and I'm aware of that, and a lot of people aren't aware of. Those are material costs and things that have to be addressed. And, you know, and whether or not that's all included in that, it probably, part of that gymnasium floor should be like a repair on capital outlays, just like doing the office bathroom remodel, you know? And it's kind of like the council room improvements. We don't have anything on there, but yet I know everybody would love to have a new council room, but it's what we can afford. So I just wanted to explain that to you.
But you don't believe that's over budgeted at all, and
No, actually, I feel it's probably a little under budgeted, actually, because there's a lot of things that need to be repaired and done around the building, but where we're going to get the money for that, that's another. Kevin, I'm sorry.
Tiffany?
Marion, I'm curious, for the insurance under material and services, why has that decreased so dramatically?
Well, what we have done in accounting is we took all of our insurance and properly charged them to the respective departments, is what we tried to do. So it's based on a percentage of,
Square footage of the
Square
building
footage.
and what the insurance charges for
So this
all.
is property insurance?
yes.
So that's a new policy instilled by staff this year in order to do it that way instead of a percentage?
I can't say it's a new policy.
Well, it's
Some
definitely
some
different than
department
last
heads
year.
have asked me, what is my actual cost of insuring my trucks, insuring all of this equipment?
Right.
So we did that because department heads have asked us, so I incorporated that in the budget. Has that gone before council to do that? No.
I'm not saying that that's not the right thing to do. I agree that that's the right thing to do. But I have that same question when it comes to other expenses as well, proportioning the correct amount to them.
Just trying to find out the history.
Right. And so, you know, obviously this has gotten a higher burden in the past, and I'm certainly not saying that that burden was correct. I agree that it should be, the cost should be more realistic. But I see here where that's been a change of policy, and we're told often that your division is a matter of policy. So I want to know if that's a policy that in the same way. And if that can be changed, I would imagine other policies could be changed as well. That was my point. Don?
We have 5 minutes to pick our items for.
Okay.
I'd like to get through these things.
Would you like to make a motion to continue then?
Does anybody have any issues? Can I just make a motion to,
Table it?
no, what would be an issue or something that we need discussion on?
Okay, well, you know, I think there are some other questions. What does sanitary services involve, for instance?
Toilet paper, paper towels for the restrooms, cleaning supplies.
Okay, and that looks like that could be budgeted a little high. I would suggest that we finish this if we're going to leave now and continue the, because,
Maybe some hand sanitizer.
that's budgeted at 1,000.
And costs are going up.
Costs are going up. What's parks, contract service miscellaneous?
That's what I'd like to know too.
Yeah, it's never happened.
It's never been used.
Well, then we could take that away.
What is it for? Do we know what it's?
It's never been used.
It's never been used. I can guess why it's there from previous years, in case our Tooth Rock Park was ever developed.
Okay,
We have a park right over here too, Gateway Park.
Oh,
Kaya, I'm sorry.
Yes, I would like, I'm wondering if this could be used. I've noticed again that there's weeding, there's trash outside, cigarette butts. I mean, is there any maintenance being done, or where does this come in here? Is it budgeted? Who does this?
For
Around- Clean up around the area, around City Hall.
That's our Public Works Department, and usually the summer seasonal position is usually cleaning up around the building. And
Only seasonal.
well, our guys do it when they have time to do it. I don't manage the Public Works, so I don't know if that is part of their schedule.
Okay, well, I was wondering if this was also, part of the, Eastgate Park
No.
Not to my
maintenance.
knowledge, no.
Okay, that's what I thought, but I wanted to be sure. Well, maybe there could be some detail scheduled in, at least
Did-
once a month.
This is a contract, we are still on Parks Contract Service? Is that
Yes.
right?
Right.
This is a contract with other companies or other people. It's not part of, we don't utilize this as part of our operational maintenance. If you want to take it out of here and include it in somewhere for maintenance of building grounds or whatever that our Public Works crew does, that's fine. But this is a contract with somebody else.
It's been suggested by Tiffany that we continue. What is the will of the committee? Do you want to continue this until the next meeting, or do you want to continue with the last two items?
The last two items done, if we could.
Well, I need a motion.
Make a motion to go till 9:30, no later, absolutely.
Is there a
Second.
There's been a motion and a second to continue until 9:30. Everybody in favor, please say yes.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed?
Opposed?
One opposed. Okay, so let's turn to page 7, and we're already there.
Are we not doing anything with property then?
Well,
I mean, yeah.
what do you want to do to it, Tiffany?
Are we done with it?
We've done it.
So do we need to make a motion to accept it then, or are we
No.
still gonna scrutinize? What do we need to change? I just need confused.
Well, I don't know why it would be any different than any of the others. We still have all the personnel expenses, et cetera, deducted from it. I don't think we can accept it in its entirety. We can just start. There's some questions about it. Somebody have a motion?
Yeah, I make a motion that we accept the Fund 1 Department 4 as it stands.
Second.
The Fund 1,
But
Fund 1
property,
Department
fund
for
Department 4.
Property.
discussion? Kevin?
I would like to see the $500 contract services that hasn't been used reallocated in this particular instance. There's $500 more for that service. So that would be my only proposal.
Where would you like to allocate it to, Kevin?
Well, we have several adjustments that are still out there.
Yes, we
that
do.
can be allocated, so.
Was that a motion, Kevin?
No, it's discussion.
Oh, discussion.
Do you wanna amend your motion?
Would you like to amend your motion, Shawna, to include
That sounds fine to
the
me.
omission of the $500 expenditure?
Sure.
I have a motion by Shawna Hazel.
Second.
And-
I'll agree to that.
Lance was the second.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Everybody in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? The motion carries.
Got a hand up.
Kevin,
So we're on
page 7. Government, community relations, bottom of page 7, Department 8.
Yeah, my only concern with this is, well, actually twofold. I think the utilities expense would be more appropriate at 1,500.
That's for the museum.
That's
That's for
museum,
the
we've already,
museum.
On page
Right at
7.
the bottom, just the
sorry.
bottom.
Okay. Travel and training, then on this particular one.
Isn't that reflected in the needs of the training that's in the back on the chart on section 5? In the same way, the planning, no?
Okay.
Okay.
What's your concerns with it, Kevin?
that's right. That's right, city council.
The aside for unexpected things that come up, and I don't think we're in a position this year that we can do that we have to allocate every dollar in order to meet our expenses, and I would propose $1,500 in a particular line item.
Is that in the form? Oksana?
Mary Ann, can you expand on what this travel and training goes to?
Travel and training is for the council.
Okay.
It's for the LOC conference that any council member would like to go to, any
Goal setting?
LGPI conferences they want to go to.
Goal setting?
Pardon?
When we have goal setting come in, somebody for goal setting comes in.
That is charged to that also. It's anything that the council needs, would like to go to training or have someone come in to do training. That's what comes out of that.
Laura?
So the money, if we were to take travel and training to 1,500, the Stern Wheeler Days looks like historically has spent more than $1,000. I'm wondering if we should.
Yeah, what's with that?
Support community programs is not just Sternwheeler Days. I just listed that because I need to know where it gets charged to. Sternwheeler Days, we do an advertisement in their book, and I believe it was $250 this year is what was authorized by the interim city administrator. What comes out of there is the volunteer appreciation that the mayor and council put on. And I was told to, by the interim city administrator, to put that down to 1,000, which basically would eliminate the volunteer appreciation dinner, or eliminate it to a certain degree.
But it won't affect Stern.
No, $250 is just Sternwheeler Days. We used to also support the school and have a banner in the school, and that was part of the previous years, but because we don't have that anymore, so.
You know, I should think that would be the mayor's decision, whether he wanted to have an appreciation dinner or not. That's always been the mayor's,
Well, if we're looking for money.
that's true, but looking for it in the right places. Tom?
Oh, no, just looking for money.
George, this is something that's been the mayor's decision on how to handle this. I mean, basically, $1,000 still covers a picnic, I guess.
Doesn't cover a great deal. George has got to be cooking, apparently.
So do you have any suggestions as far as this line item goes? Do you think it should be left at 1,000? Do you think it should be increased? And so you'll be the
Well,
first mayor ever not to have done something for the volunteers. I personally don't mind.
Well,
I think this is your decision.
it's a tough situation. I mean, there's not a lot of money, so I think the amount of money that's there, we'll just have to make do with. You know,
Okay.
it's,
The right thing to do.
that's,
It
you know,
is.
that's just, we'll just leave it that way.
You know, we had a history of Multnomah Falls and high expenses, and those days are over.
I tell you what, I can buy a lot of beef and cook a lot of hamburger for that
That's
much.
true. Lance?
Well, I was just gonna mention that, it's usually a council vote on how to do the volunteer appreciation. It usually comes to, I mean, we voted on it twice the last 2 years, so. But not that that changes anything George
That
just
was
said.
the location that you voted on.
Hasn't been the mayor
Don?
deciding it.
The potlatch, senior sewer bill, library expense, that's through the state revenue sharing, isn't it?
State revenue sharing.
The library expense is gone.
It's to the parks and rec.
Okay.
Do you have a motion to approve this with the $1,000 change made to travel and training?
I'll make that motion.
Second?
I have a motion to approve this fund, Government Community Relations, with a $1,000 reduction to travel and training. And that also is a significant, in there is a significant reduction to the amount of money allowed the mayor to, have an annual dinner. And, we have a,
Second.
It's been seconded.
okay.
In the interest of time, can we go right away or
Okay.
discussion?
Everybody in favor?
I just had the discussion on that.
No
Well,
discussion.
we wanna get.
What do you want?
I just wondered why we couldn't just eliminate travel and training for city council altogether? Why is it only 1,000? And, I mean, if we're really looking for money, maybe that's just a sacrifice the council can make. No travel and training expense. And I'd prefer to see that. So.
Yes.
Because we do goal setting, and sometimes we need, somebody to mediate for that, so I prefer to see some of it right there.
Yeah,
New council people too.
Don't,
George?
and the other thing, Lance, I just want to say is there's another thing that, and I don't know if it comes out of that or not, but, you know, like, when we have a town hall meeting, then we have to have a mediator come. Would that come out of that department, Mary Ann? Normally, yes, so I think we ought to leave it at that amount, because there are a few things that we need to take care of, just to take care of the public. That's my opinion.
I have a motion on the floor and a second. Everybody in favor, please say aye.
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 Anybody opposed?
Opposed?
Opposed.
Oh, we're gonna have to take a count here.
Okay,
So that's-
Gaida, you were
I agree
opposed?
with the mayor, that, it should be left as it is, because there could be other expenses and stuff.
No,
That's the reduction.
we just reduced it by 1,000.
Okay.
That was George's, okay. Could we redo this vote?
Let's redo this
Do a roll call vote,
again,
Madam
please.
Chair?
Okay,
Actually,
Do a roll call vote?
yes,
Can we
please.
restate the motion?
Sure.
Please, yes.
Motion was made by, Budget Committee Member Tiffany Pruitt to approve Department 7 with a $1,000 reduction in travel training. It was seconded by, Budget Committee Member George Fisher. Oh, did I say? Oh, I'm sorry, Department 7. Or eight.
Department eight.
Okay. I vote yes, or no, excuse me, Lance is first.
Oh,
Yeah, they want to roll call vote, because I think it was a little bit confusing.
Budget Committee
Okay.
Member Lance Masters.
No.
Yes.
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 Yes. No.
Yes.
Motion is passed, 3 opposed. And the rest in favor. Okay.
Madam Chair,
5
Yes.
seconds.
I would move to extend the meeting for 5 minutes.
Everybody in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Everybody opposed?
Opposed?
Okay,
Madam Chair,
yes.
I would move to change this fund to represent only the contract police services, $84,258, as the OEO position is no longer
Page 8, 9.
Thank you.
an expense.
Is that in the form of a motion?
Yes.
Anybody second that
Second.
motion?
Can you restate that?
Yeah,
My motion is to essentially approve this fund in the amount of $84,258, which reflects the contract services police with River County.
Shauna?
I digress, but I just wanted to say why I opposed. I opposed because thanking our volunteers for all the work they do is really critical, in my opinion, in a small community. The other thing that I oppose is travel and training. I would like to see the council members do more training and actually utilize it so that we can become better council members and leaders in this community, and I don't see that happening. That's why I oppose.
Thank you. Okay, now, we're working with Department 19 Police, and there's been a motion to accept this with only the $84,258 expenditure.
Second,
Seconded by,
has it been seconded?
It's already been seconded by.
Okay.
Sorry.
is there any more conversation about this? Question?
Yeah, go
Yes.
back, where are we at here? I'm
We're on
trying to
page
look at
9.
and see what
We're on page 9.
Look again.
Tiffany?
So are we just going to assume that that's going to get absorbed back into the general fund, or is some of that gonna have to go to the, incoming city administrator, since that's gonna now be his job, or what assumptions are we making here? Kevin, that's probably the answer, I'm sorry.
Kevin?
The city administrator position is fully funded in this budget,
Okay.
correct?
It is fully funded at $70,000
But, so this is a totally separate.
plus benefits.
Okay.
If we have to negotiate a different contract with the incoming city administrator, there's no way we're gonna know that until we have the contract. So,
Because are we adding this back into the city administrator's list of things to do?
I would imagine it was
has
always
been-
there
It
before.
has been his
Okay,
responsibility all along.
okay. Okay.
Lance?
I was just looking at the equipment vehicle maintenance, and I don't really know, I'm assuming that's the OEO vehicle. Are we not gonna maintain it, no change the
Gonna
oil?
maintain it, but not out of this department.
Oh.
And
So is it, I mean, the cost of it is, well, it's listed as to what it's been, so I'm just wondering if that's a concern.
Kevin?
I would suggest that since this department doesn't exist anymore, it would be hard for this department to utilize that vehicle. Because the sheriff has their own vehicle. If another department uses that car, then they should be responsible for the maintenance of it. But this department doesn't pay to maintain the utility trucks or the parks and anything else. So if another department uses the car, they should be responsible for it.
But are we budgeting it in those other departments? I'm just looking at like, what's the total cost for that vehicle? Part of the cost of maintaining that vehicle was probably reflected in this budget, so that cost has to come from somewhere else, and is that being budgeted, is my question. So, but I get your point, it makes sense, but where does, if we needed $1,000 added to the total cost of maintenance, where's that coming from now? So,
It'll have to come out of another department. It can't come out of a department that basically doesn't exist anymore. Shauna?
So we got rid of the OEO completely, and now it's going to be the role of the city administrator, whom we pay substantially more money to do these simple tasks. And that's because.
It's always
OEO
been, we have a town of 1,000 people. It's always been included in his duties
Job
before,
description.
when we had many more people than we have here now. So, that would be my suggestion, because this town isn't big enough to be able to afford
it's not
that
in his job
position.
description.
Kevin?
We have a motion on the floor. We have about 2
Okay.
seconds.
How many people, everybody in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed?
Opposed?
2 people opposed, and the motion carries.
Motion to continue.
We need to decide what's going to be on the agenda next time. I would like to have the rest of the general fund put on in case, and we'll go as far as we can.
Any other
Does
funds?
anybody agree with that?
And how about, and the remainder of the funds that we had on this agenda?
We just went through all of those.
Or did we go through all of them?
Yeah, we went.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Zip through right at the end, the last motion.
My suggestion would be that we tackle the rest of the remaining departments in the general fund. Mary Ann?
I just need to know, are we doing any of the other funds that I need to get supervisors here for?
I wouldn't imagine that if we are able to get to emergency services, I wouldn't imagine it would be at the depth where it would require a staff member yet, because I don't think we'll get that far.
So on the agenda, am I just supposed to put general fund as our topic?
General fund.
No other topic? for
And
next
its
meeting?
departments, general fund and its departments. You can list them all if you want to, all the remaining. I think it would be a good idea to have them listed so we have the option of going as far as we can. And we can keep the same agenda basically for more than one meeting. And so if you wanted to list them separately like you did here, because it serves as a good guide to go through and do those 4. How many do we have left?
You've covered all the general fund departments other than me coming back to you with, in the general fund, you went through all of the departments of the general fund, except for me coming back to you with a completed,
Okay, and the EMS,
EMS is in Fund 5, that's a separate fund.
that's a separate fund? We have to
Street,
go back
water,
to,
sewer, we still have, we had questions that we needed to address on that one, right?
okay. So, let's, do the, I don't know about electrical. That's gonna take up the whole time if we're gonna work on the general.
You haven't done Department 21 in any of the funds.
Okay, so we
which-
need to do Department 21. Admin, right. And, maybe the SDC fund? Or is that something that we still have outstanding debt that we have to? And we haven't done the OIB loan fund yet, and we won't be doing that until we budget the debt, I guess, right?
No, the OIB loan fund is already budgeted, you just didn't go through it
Okay.
yet.
Okay. So what did we decide on? That it's gonna be admin?
I think we need to listen to what we have.
Kevin?
We actually still have some work to do in the general fund.
Yes, we do.
And that's coming up with the payments
Yes,
to meet the loans
exactly.
that were approved Monday
Okay.
night. So,
So general fund and admin, would you put those
Okay.
on the agenda? Is there a motion to to continue until?
There was a motion and a second already, I see the vote.
Okay, everybody in favor?
I,
Aye. Anybody opposed? Lance? No opposed?
Heck no.